from Candlestick Park in San Francisco, it's ESPN Sunday Night Baseball. The San Francisco Giants may move to Florida. Now tonight may be the end of baseball's greatest rivalry and ESPN's national farewell to Baseball by the Bay.
I left my heart in San Francisco.
San Francisco welcomed the Giants to the Bay Area in 1958 with great excitement and fanfare and built them a brand new ballpark on Candlestick Point 2 years later. Led by the legendary slugger Willie Mays, the Giants always had a legacy of great sluggers. He was joined by the baby bull, the powerful Orlando Cepeda. Elegant Hall of Famer Juan Marichal won many a game for the Giants at Candlestick. And then there was Stretch, Hall of Famer Willie McCovey. In 1962, the Giants and Dodgers once again had an historic playoff.
Here's the pitch. A line drive to center. This could be it. Mays waiting. He's got it. The Giants win the pennant. The Giants have won it as Mays.
In 65, the Dodgers won the World Series, but John Roseborough got hit over the head by Juan Marichal's bat. In 82, a dramatic homer by Joe Morgan knocked out the Dodgers on the last day of the season. Will Clark led the Giants to a division title in 87, then to a World Series in 89. Now they may leave the city before they get a chance to return. Tonight from the city by the bay, San Francisco, ESPN Sunday Night Baseball. And maybe for the last time in San Francisco, it's the Giants and the Dodgers. Hello, everyone. I'm John Miller. Here in the Bay Area, well, I grew up here. Saw my first Major League game here at Candlestick Park many years ago, and it was the Giants and the Dodgers. The Giants won the ball game 19-8. It seems inconceivable now to somebody who grew up here that maybe the era of the Giants in San Francisco is about to end. They may be moving to St. Pete. There's a chance they will stay, but tonight just could be the last time the Giants and Dodgers ever play here at Candlestick Park. And so tonight, we're going to focus on that. The Giants and the Dodgers won last time, and we'll be looking at some of the people who made history here, like Willie Mays. He'll be here with us, Orlando Cepeda, and Vin Scully. And, of course, my partner, Joe Morgan. He also played here. And, Joe, you had one of your biggest days in 1982.
Well, John, I go back further than that. I think my fondest memory after I got over the goosebumps watching the Open, I thought about the time I was sitting in the bleachers in 1962, the final game of the season, and I watched Willie Mays hit a home run to win the ball game for the Giants and put them into that historic playoff in which they beat the Dodgers. And then in 1982, on the final day of the season, I hit a home run against the Dodgers to knock them out of a playoff with the Atlanta Braves. Those are fond memories. And then in 1989, I was standing on the field with the great Willie Mays, about to go on the air at the World Series when the earthquakes hit. So I'm looking forward to tonight. Maybe I can get a chance to finish that interview with Willie Mays.
All right. So, again, Mays and Cepeda and Vin Scully and others are going to drop in and visit with us tonight, talk about the Giants and Dodgers. We have film clips of historic moments, and we've got a lot planned for you, as well as the Giants and Dodgers at Candlestick Park. And I know Joe grew up here, so did I, and it's hard to believe that maybe this is the final time, a rivalry that began 103 years ago. Kevin Gross, who no-hit the Giants earlier this year, versus Kevin Rogers. Here in San Francisco, bright blue skies overhead, but as is the custom here, a very strong wind blowing here at Candlestick Point. Jose Offerman leads off for the Dodgers, then Brett Butler in center. Mike Sharperson, he was at the All-Star game, third base. Eric Karros, likely the Rookie of the Year in the National League. Mike Piazza, maybe the Dodgers catcher next year. Mitch Webster, the veteran, in left field. Billy Ashley, a strapping young power hitter in right field. Eric Young, another Dodger rookie, at second base. And on the mound is Kevin Gross, a no-hitter the last time he faced the Giants. And on the mound for the Giants, another young rookie, 24-year-old Kevin Rogers from Cleveland, Mississippi.
And the Giants are taking a look at a lot of young players, as is the Dodgers, and Rogers is one of the young players they're hoping that may be able to make the grade for them next year. And defensively for the Giants, they will have Willie McGee in right, Mike Felder in center, Mark Leonard in left. Williams is at third, Clayton's a shortstop, Thompson's at second, Will the Thrill Clark's at first, Decker's behind the plate, and Rogers is on the mound.
Jose Offerman will lead it off for the Dodgers. A switch hitter, shortstop. He'll be followed by Brett Butler and Mike Sharperson. Bright blue skies overhead, but a very strong wind coming in off the Pacific over the hills and heading out across the San Francisco Bay. Balls hit in the air should be an adventure tonight. There is a foul ball. Strike one to Offerman. Going to be cool here tonight, although it looks beautiful. Right now 74 degrees. Skies are clear, and that wind listed at 10 to 15, but with gusts to 25, and I think all of the gusts are right here right now.
And I tell you what, John, this ballpark tricks you. You look out and it's a beautiful facility, beautiful grass, beautiful infield, but you can't see the wind, and it will be present all evening.
So it's 2-1 now to Jose Offerman, hitting .273, 1 homer, 28 batted in. You see the effects of the wind already, and that's a real staple here at Candlestick, to see those hot dog wrappers being blown about. Brett Butler warms up on deck. And it goes to 3-1 to Offerman.
And like most young left-handers or left-handers who are coming out of the minor leagues, Rogers has trouble with his control on occasion. If he can throw strikes, he's been very successful.
And it's a walk. So Offerman draws a leadoff walk here in the final game of this series. The Dodgers won the first game here Friday 11-4. The first time this year the Dodgers had scored in double figures. Astacio over Black. McDowell got the save. Then yesterday the Giants bounced back. A rather unlikely combination. Brantley the starter and Swift the reliever combining on the shutout, beating Bobby Ojeda. Most of the year had been the other way around. Here is Brett Butler, the former Giant, who has if anything, become an even better leadoff man since going to Los Angeles. I mean, he's the quintessential leadoff man. Works the count, gets walks, and just somehow gets on base.
Well, you know, John, he was a leadoff man, as you mentioned, in the last few years of his career. But a couple of months ago, about a month ago, they moved him and moved Offerman up to first. And both of them have really prospered even more since they've been in those positions. Butler's raised his average well over 300. Been hitting well. Offerman has hit very well, raised his average up to 273. So both of them have thrived in the move, but as you mentioned, Brett Butler is still basically a leadoff hitter.
Now Roger Craig, the Giants manager, is coming out to see to his catcher Steve Decker on that bunt attempt by Brett Butler. The ball was fouled, and Decker, I think, got hit on the bare hand. So Roger's going out to make sure he's all right, and it looks like he's going to make a throw here.
It's interesting. Got his catcher's mask in his back pocket. I think I've seen that before.
I haven't seen it.
I haven't either. I've seen your players have their gloves in their back pocket, or their hats, or even a wad of tobacco, but never a mask.
Well, just as long as he doesn't keep it there when the game starts again. So Craig goes back to the dugout. The count 0-1 to Brett Butler, just starting at Candlestick Park in San Francisco. The Giants and the Dodgers. This is their final meeting of this season in any ballpark, and maybe the final time ever here at Candlestick for them. And that is a strike. This rivalry, of course, goes back to New York. The Giants were born in 1883. This is the 110th year in the Giants' history, dating back to their days in New York. And the Dodgers were born in 1890. So although they weren't called the Giants and Dodgers just yet at that time, they've been playing games against each other all of those years. This is the 103rd season of baseball between these two franchises. Offerman at first, 21 steals for the year, but also he's been caught quite often. He's got great abilities, still a rather raw talent. And it goes to 1-2 to Butler now, with Sharperson on deck.
You know, the fact that I live here, John, and have observed, you know, the sale or the not completed sale yet, there have been a lot of misconceptions about what is right and what has really happened, and I don't know if we're going to be able to clear all those things up tonight, but we'll give it a shot and try to make people understand exactly where the sale is or We can't tell them where it's going because we don't get a vote. At least I don't. I don't know if you get a vote.
I don't think so.
Okay, but
there's a lot of question whether I'll even be able to vote in the presidential election. Apparently. 1-2 the count to Butler, and he fouls this one away. Now this is Brett Butler right here. He'll do this. He might foul off 7 more here before anything else happens. Candlestick Park, it opened in 1960 and then was expanded in the time for 1971. And you see over the 103 seasons of playing against each other, that's nearly 1,900 games that have been played against each other. The Giants lead this season's series 10-7. There goes Offerman, and Butler slaps it into left field. Caught by Leonard, and a double play.
Well, anytime Butler is in a hit-and-run situation, it's very difficult for him to move the runner around the third because the outfield plays so shallow. That's a routine single for everyone else. See how close he is to the infield? But by the same token, when he makes the catch, Offerman's a dead duck because there's no way he can get back that quickly. Here comes Mark Leonard. See how close he is to the infield. There's no way for Offerman to get back. It wasn't. A lot of people say it's a bad play by Offerman, but it really was not. That's one of the risks you take when you put a hit and run on with a player like Butler because the outfield plays so shallow.
So 2 down and nobody on for the Dodgers, and here is Mike Sharperson. Sharperson made the All-Star team as the lone representative from the Dodgers, and Sharperson hitting .306, 3 homers, 21 doubles, 36 batted in. But even with Sharperson, there's a little bit of a cloud over his head. It's with most of the Dodgers this year. Here he's having his best season, made the All-Star team, a dream come true. And yet he also is known as the man the Dodgers got when they traded away Juan Guzman, who is picking up all of those victories for the Toronto Blue Jays over in the American League. Guzman's won 15 games this year. And the count now 1 ball and 2 strikes to Mike Sharperson.
So far, Rogers has been able to control his curveball, which is a very good sign for the Giants. If he can throw the curveball for strikes, he should have a pretty good outing.
And it is 2-2. Joe, when the Giants came here in '58, of course, they had the great star, Willie Mays, but the people here really warmed up to the stars that came along after they moved to San Francisco. Like Orlando Cepeda and Willie McCovey. We'll be talking to Orlando Cepeda a little bit later, as well as many others here tonight. But right now, on the strikeout, the inning is ended. No score after a half inning. Miller and Joe Morgan back here at Candlestick Park, San Francisco. The Giants and the Dodgers tonight. Our final Sunday night telecast of 1992. For the Giants, it'll be Mike Felder in center field leading it off. Willie McGee in right field, a native of the area. Will Clark at first base, hitting .300. Mark Leonard, who made that fine catch in left field. Matt Williams having his worst year at third base. Robbie Thompson, second base, batting 6th. Steve Decker, the catcher who puts his mask in his pocket. Royce Clayton at shortstop, and the pitcher, whom we have already seen, Kevin Rogers. And Joe, on the mound for the Dodgers, there is Kevin Gross. Very poor 1-loss record, fine ERA, and a no-hitter against the Giants the last time he faced them.
Well, Kevin Gross throws a variety of change-ups, off-speed pitches, and he used his fastball to set those pitches up. When he has his good control, he can pitch a very fine ball game. And defensively for the Dodgers, they will have in right field Billy Ashley, Brett Butler in center, Webster is in left, Sharperson's at third, Offerman is the shortstop, Eric Young is at second base tonight, Eric Karros, their best hitter, is at first base, and Mike Piazza is behind the plate, and on the mound, Kevin Gross.
So here is Tiny Felder. He won an award voted on by his teammates. What is it, the
Willie Mack
Award? Yeah.
It's named after the great Giant player and Hall of Famer Willie McCovey, and goes to the most inspirational player and most dedicated player at the end of each season. I was fortunate enough to win that once myself, John. It's quite an honor, and Mike Felder really deserves it. He's been a great player for the Giants this year.
You had hit a home run the last day of the season to knock the Dodgers out to win it.
Well, you do something against the Dodgers, as Lasorda said there. You do something against the Dodgers, and hey, that'll make you famous here.
1 ball to no strikes to Felder. Willie McGee and Will Clark will follow against Kevin Gross. Gross has been around a long time and has always been somewhat of an enigma because he's got great stuff,
Right.
but they feel like he always should have won more than he did. Steve Carlton used to drive him nuts. Gross drove Carlton nuts.
Yeah. Well, I agree. I think he has always had good stuff, but he's never been able to put it all together and be a consistent winner in the major leagues. He had a good fastball. He's lost something off his fastball now. I don't believe he will ever reach the potential that they had for him before. Now, I think he will really just, you know, be a good pitcher for the rest of his career.
That's a base hit for Felder. Carlos tried to get it, couldn't do it. The Giants, of course, they had Willie Mays, and then they had Orlando Cepeda. And for a while, Mays and Cepeda, it was the greatest 1-2 right-handed punch on any ball club in years and years. The people here said at that time, since Jimmy Fox and Al Simmons were reigning supreme for the great Philadelphia A's teams of the late 20s and early 30s. Orlando Cepeda, the baby bull, and he's here with us. Orlando, welcome to Sunday Night Baseball.
Nice to be here, Joe. Nice to be here.
This is Joe Morgan over here.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
my hero.
The guy you used to try to kill on those double plays when you tried to break him up.
We go back a long way. My first day in the major leagues, I got a chance to meet Orlando Cepeda.
A balk has been charged to Kevin Gross, so Felder will go to second.
You know, it's interesting, John, you were talking about the fact that, you know, Willie Mays was a star when they came here, but the people in San Francisco really embraced the new stars that were made here in San Francisco, the Orlando Cepedas. And I was the same way, and the Willie McCoveys who came along. I was kind of like these guys. These were my heroes, and you know, as I've always said, Willie Mays to me is the greatest player I've ever seen. But you know, Orlando Cepeda and McCovey and all the stars that came along after Mays were the people that they loved here in San Francisco.
McGee now. He has gotten Felder over to third as Sharperson throws him out, so the sacrifice has worked. Giants have runner at third, 1 out, and the thrill. Will Clark is coming up, and we're talking about the old Giants and Dodgers tonight, the rivalry. Cepeda, McCovey, and Orlando. Even you must enjoy watching Will Clark hit.
Very much. You know, he's a great hitter. He's a great baseball player, John. You know, he plays hard every day. He's a good first baseman, a good base runner. He's a solid baseball player.
And I think that's a good point. A lot of people only think of Will Clark as a hitter, but he's a good baseball player. He does a lot of things well.
Won a Gold Glove last year for his exploits around the bag at first. So the Giants starting to take the lead here against Gross. They have a hit already more than they did against Gross the last time they faced him. High in the air to center, plenty deep enough to get Felder home, and Will Clark has given the Giants a 1-0 lead with his 72nd RBI of the year.
Well, Will Clark has a little uppercut in his swing, so he will hit a lot of sacrifice flies, a lot of fly balls for you. They try to get in on him, and this is one of the most beautiful swings in all of baseball. Look how just smooth and easy, and I mean, even though he hit a fly ball to center field, it looks like that when he hits a home run as well. He has a great swing.
So Orlando, the Giants and Dodgers, I mean, you go back to the early days of the Giants and Dodgers here in California. Would you have any early memories in particular, 58, 59?
Well, my first big league game was against the Dodgers in City Stadium, John, and to me that's the biggest thrill, you know, in my career. For some reason, every time we played the Dodgers, I don't know the reason, but hate used to come to all the players. We don't talk to Maury Will, to Tommy David, John Rosborough. We hate it, and they feel the same way.
And a lot of guys hated Maury in particular, didn't they?
Yeah, because Maury, he beats you anyway. You know, he got on first base, he still second base, run down play, he hit you with the elbows, and you know, he was a tough ball player. He hit me in the head a couple times.
Yeah.
Double play situation.
I mean, you're sliding into second, he hit you with the throw?
Yes, he hit me. I mean, Willie, Maury did everything to beat you. You know, he became great switch hitter. He's still second base, third base, squeeze, bunt, everything. And he was mean.
Mark Leonard with a ground ball to second to Eric Young, who throws him out, and that is the inning. Orlando Cepeda's here with us from Candlestick Park. The Giants won, the Dodgers nothing. After one, we'll continue on after these messages.
I might start a fight tonight to let people really know about what the rivalry really was.
As long as you got Dodgers on your shirt, the Giant fans and the Giant players will always hate you, and vice versa. So I think the rivalry will continue no matter where they go.
There's one out. The guy who appears to be the Rookie of the Year in the National League, Eric Karros, hitting the fly ball to Willie McGee. One down. There's Lasorda and Roger Craig. Orlando, 1962. Roger Craig with the original New York Mets. Willie Mays at first base. And Craig hit you with the pitch. You charged the mound, and there was some bad blood that went on that day.
So what happened, Roger used to hit me.
All the time.
All the time. A couple of weeks before in New York, he hit me a couple of times. I said, right, next time you're going to hit me, I got to go after you. So they came here on Sunday, and they walked Mays. And then he hit me. He put him at first base. And then he picked me off in first base. And then Willie and Chacon got into fight in second base.
Right, Elio Chacon, the shortstop for the Mets.
And Elio went after Willie. You know, Elio was small. And Willie got him, threw him in the air, and then
He picked up Chacon and threw him in the air?
Yes, and Roger went after Mays. I went after Roger.
Will Clark giving chase, but it is back in amongst the spectators as Mike Piazza is up with a count of 2-1.
See, that's what's interesting, I think, about the way the game was played before. You know, Roger Craig would hit you, but you let it go once. But after the second time or the third time, you have to go after him. That's one of the things I think is lost in today's game is, you know, the rivalries where, hey, every once in a while we just have to mix it up.
The thing is, Joe, that he's from Slater in the black, in the outside corner. I hit it over to right field. I'm not supposed to hit that pitch.
Right.
He told me, I'm going to get you. And he hit me right in my rib, you know. I'm not supposed to say anything.
But you did.
Yes, because, you know, you can take only so much.
Roger Craig said when that brawl broke out, as Piazza hits another foul, the benches were empty. And there's Orlando Cepeda, the baby bull. I mean, he's heading out for Roger Craig. Now, Craig's a big guy.
Yeah.
Craig said he started shouting at his catcher to throw him the ball because he says he had nothing to protect himself with against the baby bull, and the catcher wouldn't throw it. I said, what were you going to do with the ball? He said, I was going to throw it at him again.
Yeah, no, yeah.
That's deep in the right field, and Willie McGee is able to catch up with it, and Piazza is retired. For out number 2, Orlando, you were here for the very first Giants-Dodger game, 1958 at Seal Stadium. The Giants won that ball game 8-0, and at that time, I mean, the Giants owned San Francisco and Northern California. I mean, you guys were heroes no matter where you went.
And that's very sad. You know, that's why I'm very sad, John, to see the team go, because it's hard to believe and hard to see San Francisco with no baseball team. You know, since 58 to 92, people here have baseball. I don't care what they say about Candlestick. It's a tough ballpark to play baseball. But Mays never complained. McCovey never complained. I never complained. And people that come to the ballpark. So this is getting to be a very sad for me and for everybody who loves San Francisco.
So what do you think? Is there hope that they will keep the ball club here? Or do you fear that the ball club is lost?
Well, nobody knows what's going on, John. I hope that it will stay here for at least for 2 or 3 years, you know, because it's hard to believe that there won't be no team here in the future.
We've got Mitch Webster up. 1 ball, 2 strikes to count. 2 down, nobody on. Second inning, the Giants lead 1-0 over the Dodgers. This is Matt Williams, and he throws out Mitch Webster, and that's the inning. 1-0 Giants after 1.5 from Candlestick Park.
Genuine Draft Light brings you this day in baseball. Back in 1924 on September 20th, Grover Cleveland Alexander won his 300th game. Took him 12 innings. The Cubs beat the Giants. Let's go back to John and Joe at the stick.
All right, Gary, and also on this date, September 20th, 33 years ago, 1959, the Giants and the Dodgers met at Seal Stadium. The Dodgers back at Johnny Padres beat the Giants 8-2. And that was the last game ever played at Shield Stadium. They moved into Candlestick the next year. In Orlando, that's got to be a painful memory for you because the Giants had a 2-game lead in '59 with 8 games to go. The Dodgers came in here and swept you guys. And you dropped from first place to third place by the time they left after that final game on this date 33 years ago.
Yes, I remember that very well, that they came to town. Maury Will just came from the minor leagues. He killed us with like 11 hits, 4 games. You know, I remember that very clearly.
Well, what happened to you guys?
We just collapsed.
I'm still angry about it.
I am.
Joe is too.
You were here.
Yeah.
You were here, right?
Yeah, we were here.
Joe, I say 59 to Joe, and Joe says, don't bring that up.
Don't bring it up. Orlando, I know you have sons, or we have any future Orlando Cepedas playing in the major leagues?
Well, I have one, Malcolm Cepeda. He's 19 and he's a good ball player. I have Ali Cepeda. He's 15, look pretty good. But you never know. You never know.
That's a base hit for Matt Williams, an infield single. Leading off for the Giants here in the second inning. Matt beats it out for a single. Giants lead 1-0. Orlando Cepeda's been here with us, sharing some memories. We got the Giants and Dodgers tonight from Candlestick. And as we take a look at this here, Orlando, we just want to thank you for stopping by. You look great. I hope all is going well for you.
Thank you. Let me be here.
And as always, a
Thank you, Joe. Thank you very much.
Cha-Cha. Orlando Cepeda, the baby bull. Mucho gusto, señor.
Muchas gracias.
I was wondering if he was going to remember his name was Cha-Cha. I mean, that's surprised you took you that long, John, knowing you.
Orlando Cepeda, number 30 when he was with the Giants. An MVP when he went to St. Louis. The big gun. Like the Cardinals right now, that's what they're looking for.
That's exactly what they need, another baby bull. But then so do about 25 other teams. They need him as well.
Matt Williams with the infield single. Robbie Thompson, the hitter now. 1-0. The Giants lead. We're in the last of the second inning. Later tonight, we're expecting to have Willie Mays stop by and talk over old times with the great Say Hey kid, Willie Mays. Many feel the greatest there ever was in this game. And Joe, in our line of work, broadcasting baseball, my vote for the greatest there ever was at broadcasting baseball. Vin Scully going to stop by.
Yeah. Yeah, Vin's going to stop by. I think Vin probably benefited so much from the team moving from New York to Dodger Stadium because Vin is a California kind of guy. I mean, he really is. Yeah. I believe that.
I think he grew up a Giants fan in New York. Went to Fordham, but he was hired by Red Barber and the Dodgers to start his broadcast career. And I think this is his 43rd season of actually broadcasting these Giants-Dodgers games. He was there for the Bobby Thompson game in '51, for the playoff in '62. He's been here for all of them all through the years. 1 ball, 2 strikes to Robbie Thompson.
John, there, as we mentioned earlier, a lot of different sides to this issue about the stadiums, about the team being sold. We're going to get some comments later from some people in St. Petersburg, and we're going to get some comments from maybe Lee Steinberg, because he is part of the group that's trying to keep, you know, the Giants here in San Francisco.
One and 2 to Thompson. Two and 2 now to Thompson. Nobody out. Matt Williams at first. Kevin Gross gave up a run in the first. Single by Felder, a balk, a bunt, and a fly ball, and the Giants have a run. Fred Butler into the sunshine in right center. That one carried real well, and there is one away. Williams goes back to first. Giants may already be sold, but Rick Dodge, the St. Petersburg city manager, can't understand the move to keep him here.
Surrounding communities have over 10 years to solve the issues and problems surrounding that franchise and make it successful. People forget that Bob Lurie was an individual who stepped in 1976 and saved the franchise from moving to Toronto because of his commitment to San Francisco. But that area has not shared that commitment back.
It's Rick Dodge again, the St. Petersburg city manager.
And a pretty accurate statement, I would say.
Here is Steve Decker, the Giants catcher at the plate. 1 out, 1 on in the second. Well, Joe, somebody brought up tonight, they said they've got this move now to buy the Giants and keep them here, buy them from Bob Lurie. And, of course, one thing that is very important to that is building a new ballpark here. There's talk that there is a plan to do that with private funds. 1-0 to Decker. And the question was brought up by somebody here in the press box tonight. If they've got a plan to build a ball club, who's to say Bob Lurie might just announce, hey, I'm keeping the ball club, and I'll move into that new ballpark you're building for me.
I don't think that's going to happen, you know, from my personal observations. But I must say, if I was Bob Lurie, I would find it difficult to understand how they can build a ballpark for someone else who just buys the club now, and I've owned it for 16 years, and they couldn't build one in that time. So that would be a difficult thing for me to understand if I was Bob Lurie.
Offerman catching the pop-up by Decker. And you saw Offerman had to move around a little bit. The ball getting up into that famed candlestick wind. 2 down, and Royce Clayton is coming up.
You know, Royce Clayton is their shortstop of the future. Royce Clayton has a tremendous amount of ability. He can, you know, the thing that surprised me the most is I thought he was going to hit a little better because of all the accolades he got in the minor leagues. But I was worried about his defense. It's been just the opposite. He has played a fantastic shortstop for the Giants this year, but he hasn't hit as well as they anticipated. And that's a big problem. He hasn't really, in my opinion, improved as much as I thought he would from opening day to now. I think you're getting a look at Wendell Kim come down and talk to him because he squared around to bunt, and I think they do not want your 8th place hitter bunting with 2 outs to move this runner to second base for the pitcher. So I think that's what Bruce Kim immediately called timeout about and came to tell Clayton, you're hitting in the 8th spot, do not bunt.
1 ball, no strikes to Clayton, hitting only .218. 280 at bats. Into the sunlight and into the wind and into the glove of Billy Ashley in right field. It was an adventure, but he got up and made the grab. The cerulean blue sky at Candlestick Park. Vin Scully, the voice of the Dodgers, when we come back.
ESPN Sunday Night Baseball is brought to you by Energizer Batteries. Nothing outlasts the Energizer.
There's Alcatraz out in the San Francisco Bay, and you can see the water rather turbulent out there. The wind blowing in through the Golden Gate from the Pacific and heading off toward the hills of Oakland and beyond. And there's the fog drifting in gently over the hills of the peninsula here. I'm John Miller along with Joe Morgan. We are at Candlestick Park here in San Francisco. The Dodgers coming up in the 3rd inning with Billy Ashley, and we're pleased to have with us Vin Scully, the great broadcaster of the Los Angeles Dodgers, in the Hall of Fame, who's been watching the Giants and Dodgers for many, many years. And Vin, what do you think? Is this the end of the Giants and Dodgers in San Francisco?
Well, John, I'm not sure, because certainly I'm not privy to anything that's going on, and obviously there's a great deal going on. But getting an impression from those people in the city, there is a definite feeling that they will be leaving.
1 ball and 2 strikes to Billy Ashley. Now, Vin, 1958, the 2 ball clubs come from New York. I mean, what an historic move. 2 New York ball clubs and historic ball clubs, both coming to California. And you grew up in New York. You must have been torn a bit.
I was raised in the old Polo Grounds in New York. My first game that I ever saw, I was a little kid sitting in the bleachers. Cost 55 cents. And the first game was a Giant-Dodger game. I was a rabid Giant fan as a kid because I lived in Manhattan. I went to school, a grammar school, so that I could walk to the Polo Grounds. And thanks to the Police Athletic League and the Catholic Youth Organization, there were a lot of times where I could go to baseball games free. So consequently, I grew up there. And my all-time boyhood idol was Mel Ott. I lifted my right leg and looked just like him until I swung and nothing happened. And so sure, when they were leaving, it was quite a blow to me. And fortunately, I was lucky enough to be invited to go along.
You know, when I think about you, though, you know, you're talking about New York and you growing up there. You're a California kind of guy to me, though.
Well, not really, though, Joe. You know, I'm still a Northeast establishment type person. I'm still a button-down shirt rather than, you know, something else.
Here now is Eric Young. Well, Ben, when they came here in '58, the first game was right here in San Francisco at the old Seal Stadium. And then just, what, 2-3 days later, the first game at the Coliseum in Los Angeles.
That's right. And neither ballpark seemed fitting for the major leagues, but we all understood it was temporary. The first game here at Seal Stadium, if I remember correctly, I think Drysdale started the game, and they lost badly. But it was the beginning. And Jimmy Davenport, who played third for the Giants that year in '58, I think he hit about 500 against the Dodgers. He was the greatest hitter they ever saw that particular year. It was a raggedy beginning. The Dodgers were a 7th place team, but fortunately for them, they won the pennant in '59, and the Giants came up with a good team, so that the Giants and the Dodgers were very much in a bitter pennant race in '59. Everybody thinks '59 was the race between the Dodgers and the Braves, but the Giants were very much in it.
Well, May 11th, 1963, you remember a game, the Dodgers and the Giants. Sandy Koufax had a special night.
It's 9:46 p.m. 2-2 to Harvey Keene. 1 strike away. Sandy into his windup. Here's the pitch. Swung on and missed. A perfect game.
And that's the way it was. The second of Koufax's 4 no-hitters, and the man behind the mic, as he has been for so many Giants-Dodgers game over the years, Vin Scully. Gross has grounded out to short. The Dodgers are retired. 1-0 Giants after 2.5. Miller along with Vin Scully and Joe Morgan, and we are here at Candlestick Park. Just before we went to the break there, we had the tape of Sandy Koufax no-hitter, and Vin, you've been there for a lot of those Dodger no-hitters over the years.
I've been very lucky. Somebody did an addition. I did not, and I believe it's 16 no-hitters and 3 perfect games. So that's lucky enough to be there.
And you were there for Larson's?
Oh yeah, Larson. I did the last half of that World Series game.
You know, John, I have an interesting story about Koufax's perfect game. I was playing for the Houston Astros, and we had just arrived in town, and we were going to the hotel, and the bus driver shows you the difference. Now everybody has their earphone on, but we were going to the hotel, and they had the game on the radio, and we listened to your call the last 6 outs. Everyone became interested. Of course, we weren't that interested in the Dodger game until it became close, and down the stretch we listened. And I think all of us on the bus jumped up with you when he pitched the perfect game, even though he was not our teammate.
It was memorable.
And we were also happy we weren't going to have to face him.
Kevin Rogers, by the way, is the hitter. 2-1 to Kevin Rogers. And we are in the last of the third. The Giants lead the Dodgers here 1-0. Vin Scully is here with us. And Vin, the Giants and Dodgers. Now, we had Tom Lasorda tell us earlier that as long as it says Giants and Dodgers across the shirts, then people will be excited by that. However, it's not San Francisco and L.A. any longer. If they move, it's not Brooklyn and Manhattan any longer.
No, realistically, I think it will change. The intensity will have to change. First of all, in New York, one of the great things that made the rivalry of the Giants and the Dodgers was the proximity of the fans. They could be abrasive to one another all winter long. If you worked in the post office slotting mail, the guy next to you was a Dodger fan, you're a Giant fan. I mean, you're chewing at each other all winter. And that added to the rivalry. When they came to California, I worried that there would not be the same intensity because the cities were separated not by a river as in New York, but by almost 500 miles. However, the city of San Francisco for a long time looked down on the city of Los Angeles. Right. For instance, those people who live here refer to it as the city. Los Angeles, I think, prior to '58, certainly the people in San Francisco thought L.A. is a city where guys wear hand-painted nudes on their ties and the women shop wearing bikinis with hair and curlers. But Los Angeles has grown until now. It is a sophisticated city, and I think there is some resentment in San Francisco. And I know Herb Cain, the brilliant writer up here, has talked about that. But hey, L.A. has a great county museum. L.A. has a symphony. They have a ballet. They have, so the cities have grown, but there's always that underlying feeling. Not L.A. towards San Francisco, but certainly from San Francisco towards L.A. That also will be a rupture in the series. But you know the darndest thing will happen. One knockdown pitch, one fight, and they'll start chewing at each other again.
Mike Felder, the hitter. He scored the only run of this ball game after a single in the first inning. Rogers having struck out, 1 out in the third, 1-0. The Giants lead the Dodgers. It was 1962 when the Giants came from behind in the final week and then won the playoff from the Dodgers. Came from behind in the 9th inning to win the playoff. Was that the major disappointment of your time with the Dodger baseball in California?
Oh, in California, because you remember I had to live through Bobby Thompson's home run. And even the year before that, my first year with the Dodgers, Dick Sisler hit a 10th inning home run for Philadelphia to win the pennant. And I remember thinking, well, I'm glad that's over with. It'll never be any tougher than that. And my gosh, 51, Bobby hits the home run. But then we came out here, and as you say, 62 was a remarkable season. And I must say, in all honesty, I'm not being provincial or parochial or trying to be a fan, but had Koufax not come up with what was medically diagnosed as Raynaud's phenomenon, where the fingers of his left hand went numb, so he couldn't feel the ball and he couldn't pitch. Had he remained healthy, they would have won easily in 62. But that's all part of the story and the legend and the drama of the series.
Oh, they don't even think about that here in San Francisco.
Oh, and I don't blame them.
All they think about 62 is, should Whitey Lockman have sent Matty Alou on May's double in the bottom of the 9th inning?
That's right. It's like whenever St. Louis is mentioned, we will forever say Lasorda shouldn't have pitched to Jack Clark. You know, so that's all part of being baseball. It's great. I mean, look, if Terry Forster had not pitched to Joe Morgan, maybe it would have been different here in '82. But it's great. It's great. The only feeling I have about the Giants tonight, and I remember reading this just the other day in a book where the character in the book was talking about life. And he said, nobody knows where he's going, but everybody knows where he's been. And that's the Giants.
Right.
Ace hit for Willie McGee. Yep, indeed. I mean, the Giants, one of the storied franchises of baseball or any sport. I mean, 109 years in existence, and all of those years at the Polo Grounds.
I believe that the Giant organization, New York and San Francisco, have more members in the Hall of Fame than any other team in the major leagues.
That's correct.
That's the kind of a remarkable franchise it was and still is. And hopefully, whether it's here or St. Petersburg, Tampa, whatever, it will remain thriving because it's a great part of the game. Gosh, John McGraw, the Giants, they just go along together as part of the country, really.
Well, among the current Giants, the man who's got the best shot of one day making the Hall of Fame is at the plate right now. Will Clark with McGee at first base, 2 down, 1-0. The Giants ahead. 1989, Joe touched on it. The World Series, the Giants and the A's. But before that World Series, Will Clark in the National League Championship Series put together one of the most impressive, imposing individual accomplishments ever seen in postseason, and you were here to broadcast it.
He is a remarkable hitter, and he truly wears the label of franchise player. Koufax was a franchise player, and he's a franchise player. He's just a classic hitter, and Joe, you would know more about it than I would.
I don't think so.
You don't think he's a classic hitter?
I don't think I know more about it. You have seen the Duke Snyders of the world. You've seen the Gil Hodges and all the great players. So I really think that you've probably seen a lot more great hitters than I have, really.
Well, the one that I didn't see, I was a kid and I saw him late as a manager of the Giants, but Bill Terry must have been something. Bill Terry, a Giant first baseman, who one year hit 401. I mean, think of that.
Yeah.
401. And Bill Terry is in the Hall of Fame, played first, managed the Giants. And, of course, Will is following in his footsteps. But Terry, who played like 20 years, and I'm guessing, I read it once, I had like a lifetime batting average of 341.
Yeah.
Now, Will's hitting like 302 in his career, so he's got a ways to go.
Yeah.
But they've had some good ones wear that Giant uniform.
You're right. I think, we were talking earlier, and we think he's going to join us a little later on. And I think the greatest guy to wear a Giants uniform that I ever saw, obviously, was Willie Mays. I didn't get to see some of the previous guys you were talking about, Bill Terry, etc. But I think, watching Willie Mays when he played against the Dodgers, to me, was the greatest thrill that I ever had watching another athlete. I mean, his performances against the Dodgers under adverse circumstances because he was always on his back when Drysdale pitched. But to see him, the enthusiasm and the intensity that he had, you know, because we saw every game on television, I thought that was that's what kind of inspired me, to be honest with you, to want to be a Major League Baseball player, watching him play.
He was, in my opinion, and during my time, he was the best all-around baseball player I ever saw. And one reason, I'm not sure about pitching, but I honestly had the feeling that Willie Mays could have been an all-star and a Hall of Famer at almost any position on the field. He was that good.
That was a...
Oh, did Clark want that? That would have been another double.
Well, not only that, Vin, he's hitting 300 on the nose. You need those. That inch could cost him a 300 season, as we know.
That'll teach him to break his bat, see. Boy, what a hitter.
Will Clark, in 89, what did he have? 13 for 22, something incredible.
Well, he and Mark Grace were actually putting on a show. I mean, they said who was the best first baseman? I don't know, because they were both hitting a lot of line drives.
And I think Will made the statement this year. He's made 10 errors, I think. And the story I read where he was quoted as saying, you know, 7 of those 10 errors were throwing errors. And so had I not made the throwing error, as far as the glove is concerned, he's right there with Mark Grace.
Yeah, well, Mark Grace, he just had his streak broken, I guess. He went, you know, like 90-something games without an error.
2-2 to Clark. He's got a new bat up there. 2 down in the 3rd inning. McGee at first. 1-0. The Giants lead. McGee is running. And Clark has struck out. Clark was ruled to have swung at that ball by plate umpire Brian Gorman.
Can I give you one quick thing? Yeah. The plate umpire tonight is Brian Gorman. Yeah. Brian Gorman's dad was Tom Gorman, a wonderful umpire, a great guy from New York. His dad wore the New York Giant uniform in 1939. Isn't it lovely that he would be the plate umpire on the last game tonight?
Indeed. Vin Scully, we were thrilled to have him, the great voice of the Dodgers. We'll be back. John Miller and Joe Morgan back at Candlestick Park in San Francisco. The Giants and the Dodgers. The Giants will have 5 more games at Candlestick after tonight. 2 with Atlanta, 3 with Cincinnati. The final game is next Sunday. But this is the final Giants and Dodgers game. And as Vin Scully said, maybe the final ever here in San Francisco between the Giants and Dodgers. And on the bunt attempt by Offerman, Matt Williams has thrown him out. Now, there is a plan to build a ballpark here in the Bay Area. So says San Francisco Mayor Frank Jordan, who explains the city's game plan to build one.
The idea is to have the property and continue to pursue building a stadium, but it will be on city-owned land and with private funding. That's the difference. The others were all public funding. The idea is to show that commitment and look at 1-year increments. There's a 5-year contract to keep the Giants here right now. But then each year, the investors will look and see what kind of progress we're making in the city towards going to the new stadium.
All right. Here's Brett Butler. And he takes a strike. Butler hit a little fly ball into a double play in the 1st inning. An outstanding play turned in by Giants left fielder Mark Leonard. Kevin Rogers on the mound, the rookie left-hander of the Giants, and he is not allowed to hit yet until just recently.
You would have to put the kids of death on the kid.
No, he hit that ball just before I finished saying that.
Aren't you aware that you're not supposed to mention a guy has a no-hitter?
Now, the great Dodger broadcaster, Red Barber, said, no, it's your job to report it.
Okay.
Besides, it's only the 4th inning. If it had been the 9th inning, maybe you got a point.
All right.
So Butler's aboard, 1 away. First hit for the Dodgers. And here is Mike Sharperson. 1-0. The Giants lead. We're in the 4th inning. And again, please remember tonight we got the Dodgers are in last place, the Giants in 5th place. Both ball clubs going nowhere. But we do have the historic significance of perhaps this being the final Giants-Dodger game, the greatest rivalry in any sport dating back to 1890. They've been battling it out with each other for 103 seasons. And, of course, they both moved from New York and transferred that rivalry to the West Coast in 1958. And so tonight, with the lack of significance in terms of the standings of the ball game itself, we are trying to concentrate on the historic significance of maybe this being the last one, because obviously they would still be the Giants and Dodgers, but St. Pete and L.A., I don't think there's a whole lot of animosity or competition between those 2 cities. And the rivalry, as it has been all of these many years, may well pretty much be a memory if the Giants do indeed go to St. Pete. So tonight we're trying to go back to the history of the rivalry and talk about some of the things that happened over the years, some of the many memories. We've had Orlando Cepeda, the Baby Bull, has been here with us. Vin Scully with his many memories. There's a foul as Butler was running the pitch. The count is 1 ball, 1 strike. But if at times you say, well, why aren't they concentrating more on the game? I think that's what we're trying to do here tonight. And
John, I think you said all that to say we're not going to do our usual analytical analysis of the game.
That's true.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Now we got it.
Yeah. Yeah, we're not paying that close attention to it. Here's Sharperson with a count of 1 ball, 1 strike. Butler running again, and he has hit a double play looper to Robbie Thompson to Will Clark, and down go the Dodgers just like that. So at the end of 3.5 innings, the Giants won, the Dodgers nothing. John Miller along with Joe Morgan back here at Candlestick, and we are joined now by Lee Steinberg. Now, you know him probably from the sports pages as one of these super agents in sports, baseball, football, you name the sport, name a superstar. Perhaps Lee Steinberg represents him a good chance. But Lee Steinberg also has come forth as a citizen of the Bay Area, trying to put a group together to buy the Giants from Bob Lurie to keep them here. So Lee Steinberg has stopped by. And Lee, what's the status? Have you done it?
I would guess that the local group is probably going to make an offer within the next 10 days to try and keep the Giants in San Francisco. You know, I was listening to Vin Scully talk, and I remember as a kid going in 1961 to see the Dodgers play the Giants, Sad Sam Jones, Carl Erskine, L.A. Coliseum, and it's been a real important part of growing up for a lot of us here in California, and part of our cultural heritage.
There's a ball 2 to Mark Leonard. Leonard, Williams, and Thompson coming up. The Giants lead 1-0 over the Dodgers. Last of the 4th inning.
And their fans are yelling for Lee Steinberg. They get a chance to see him here, and they know he's here in the booth. And they're yelling. They're clapping for him, which is good because Lee is trying to accomplish something that they all want.
Well, you know, Joe, you sort of have 2 identities. One is we've got clients here on the Giants, Will Clark and Matt Williams. But
Offerman gets the put out, and Leonard is retired, 1 away.
But on the other hand, I have a home in Berkeley. I have a 6-year-old son named Jonathan, and he looked at me when the news flashed on the screen that we were going to perhaps lose the Giants, and he said, "Dad, why are they going?" And I really didn't have a good answer. And it seems to me that we've been able to mobilize a tremendous amount of energy in this area to keep the team here.
All right. I have one. Let me ask you a question here, John. You said you're about to make an offer. I guess my question would be, why has it taken so long for you to make an offer, knowing what the price is on the team, etc., if these guys, if you want to, you know, keep the team here?
Well, Joe, the local group headed by George Shinn and a group of probably the wealthiest local investors who have ever bought a team before, a series of billionaires. This local group is following very closely the game plan laid out by National League President Bill White. Remember that right in the middle of the effort to keep the team here, the commissioner was replaced. So we're following what Bill White and the National League and American League owners say. And I'm quite confident that this is not going to be the last game. This rivalry will continue. This team belongs in the Bay Area.
1 ball, 1 strike to Matt Williams, and an infield hit. His first time, 1 out, nobody on. Last of the 4th, 1-0. The Giants lead the Dodgers. Kevin Gross on the mound for Los Angeles. Robbie Thompson on deck. And a base hit for Matt Williams. So Lee Steinberg is here with us, trying to put together the group to put a bid for the Giants. And Lee, I mean, your gut feeling. I mean, you feel confident. You feel this. I mean, is it going to happen?
Yes, I think it is, John. A month ago, everyone took it as a fait accompli when one of the major investors pulled out of the group here in San Francisco. But we've had an incredible number of fans writing letters, businesses subscribing for season tickets. We've had a mayor, a real activist mayor in Frank Jordan, who's given all sorts of concessions. And an incredible group of local investors pulled together, and George Shinn, who's an entrepreneur from Charlotte, came together with them. And we're now looking at a situation where there is a commitment from the mayor to go ahead and make sure that we get a new ballpark, privately funded. And we've got an incredible deep pocket, stable group of people here in the Bay Area fighting very hard to keep the team. Now, look, Tampa Bay and St. Pete deserve a team. There's no question about it. It's a great city. I feel tremendous empathy for them, but just not ours. They can have a team. They can have an expansion team. And I know that there are 6-year-olds like my son in Tampa, St. Pete, that very much want baseball, but why rip a living? For those of us who care about baseball, we care a lot. And why rip a living franchise here, which is supported, and move it across the country? You know, John, it's not just that the Giants would be moving to St. Pete. They almost undoubtedly would realign, and the Giants would be lost from the National League West, so that this would be it.
Realigning is a lot easier said than done, from what I've been able to see.
But I guess,
yeah, I mean, it's a good point what you're saying. But well, let me just go one step further. The point of all of this, the Giants moving, perhaps to St. Pete, has to do with this ballpark and the lack of being able to build a new one in a different location that would be more baseball-like and whatever. What about that? I mean, the new investors, I'm sure, would be interested in that. Is there going to be a new ballpark here?
Yes, so be a new ballpark in San Francisco probably within the next 5 years. There's a
So, I mean, these investors who are going to put their money up, I mean, can they be assured that there's going to be a new ballpark? The hit and run has been busted, and Matt Williams is out at second base. 2 down.
This is torture to have to watch my client go out that way. Yes, there'll be a new ballpark. There's land at 7th and Townsend, an area in the midst of San Francisco. The city will make some arrangement for that land to end up being used by a ballpark. We actually had much more interest by private investors in going into the business of building a ballpark than there was in some senses to buy the team.
So the new ballpark is a sure thing or nearly sure?
I don't have a set of plans here, neither does Mayor Jordan nor the local group, but there's a commitment, and I believe it will happen.
Lee Steinberg. The Giants have gone down on the Thompson strikeout, 1-0 San Francisco. Miller and Joe Morgan back at Candlestick Park. As you see, part of the crowd out here tonight to watch the Giants and Dodgers. They had 31,000 out here yesterday and more than 21,000 out on Friday, and maybe somewhere in the neighborhood of 18 to 20,000 tonight. Tommy Lasorda, and he for one will not miss Candlestick Park. He doesn't like it. He never did like it. Lasorda with the Dodgers, and also he doesn't like what's been happening with his Dodgers this year. You know, we've been talking about the Giants and Dodgers and the great rivalry over the years. The Dodgers have not finished in last place in any season in 88 years. Let's see, 87 years. 1905 was the last time the Dodgers had a ball club that finished in last place, and they've definitely got a chance to do that this year. The Giants are the team nearest them in the standings, and there have been very few times in the last 103 seasons of the Giants-Dodgers rivalry where the Giants and Dodgers were down as well. I mean, I think, Joe, when you talk about the Giants and Dodgers, most of the years, both of them have been good with great players.
You know, one of the things that I find as a lifelong Dodger fan interesting is both teams had set lineups. So for years and years and years, whether it was Cepeda, Mays, McCovey, or the Dodgers with Maury Wills and Koufax Drysdale, the players stayed the same. Yeah. And the Dodgers have gone away from that now.
That's a good point.
Instead of having the players come up through the minors and then bringing Garvey, Buckner, and Say, and that whole group along, they've switched. It's harder to identify with either two.
Yeah, indeed. We're looking at Eric Karros, who may be a fixture for the Dodgers for years to come. He's probably going to be the National League Rookie of the Year. He's got 19 homers, 80 batted in, and one of the few bright spots for the Dodgers as they've been looking at developing some young players. Tommy Lasorda says you try to make a positive out of a negative. The whole season has been a huge negative, but getting a long look at some of these young players has been, for Lasorda, one of the bright spots, knowing more about what they've actually got in terms of these young players. And in the case of Carroll's, they like what they've got. In the case of some of the young guys, they've seen a lot of them, and they've seen too much. So 3-2 to Carroll's into center, and right there is Felder. Look out, wind blowing around out number 1. Now, with the counteroffer coming in to retain the team in San Francisco, there is speculation that legal action will be taken by the city of St. Petersburg. Rick Dodge talks about it.
So the damages, the city of St. Petersburg, real damages we would suffer will be in the hundreds of millions of dollars. And if those damages occur because someone has interfered with our contract coming to full fruition, the city is prepared to take any and all appropriate legal measures.
That's Rick Dodge, the city manager of St. Petersburg, as Mike Piazza, the godson of Tommy Lasorda and probably the Dodgers catcher of the future beginning next year, has fouled away 0-1 the count. So Lee Steinberg, what do you tell your investors about this possibility of a monstrous lawsuit and these hundreds of millions of dollars of damages that could be sought?
Well, last Monday, the Board of Supervisors in San Francisco voted to indemnify the investors and to stand in front of them in case there is a lawsuit. Anyone can sue anybody for anything. This is the most litigation-crazy society I've ever seen. People sue at the drop of a dime. That doesn't mean that an effort by people to keep a team that's been here 32 years is in any way unlawful.
Strike 3 called to Piazza,
but I think
he is 0 for 2.
You know, I'm hopeful that you're going to be able to keep this team here, because obviously, again, I grew up here watching the Giants, and I love the Giants. But I think also the biggest problem with the lawsuit, as I understand it, is the people who are voting against the stadium in the first place are going to start some kind of action to keep, you know, the council from indemnifying the group. So that's, you know, I mean, I'm on your side. I want it to work, but I see a lot of obstacles that have not been stepped over yet, and I don't know if they're going to be stepped over in time enough to keep the other owners from voting to let the team go.
There's a drive by Webster deep into left field, and this one is gone, a home run, and it's tied up. The home run by Mitch Webster, and the Dodgers have tied the game. Kevin Rogers, the rookie, with a one-hit shutout with 2 down in the 5th inning, but now Webster with his 6th home run of the year, and it is 1-1.
John,
well, take a look at this. Is a fastball, and it's up a little bit, and the ball just goes right over the left field wall. Certain afternoons, as tonight, the ball will really jump to left field. Most of the time it does not, and that's what a young player looks like when he gives up a home run.
So 2 men gone, and here is Billy Ashley, another guy who's well capable of hitting home runs. They think he's going to be a big slugger, but he's probably not ready for the big leagues yet. Probably AAA bound next year. Ashley takes a strike. Lee Steinberg is here with us, the man trying to put together a group to purchase the Giants and keep them in San Francisco. Lee, you were about to say.
Well, I was about to say that I spent many long nights here when I was going to college and law school, fending myself off as a Dodger fan from my Giant friends, so that I come at it the other way, where we were
that's a base hit for Ashley,
rooting as hard as we could for the Dodgers at all points. Joe, what you were saying about the difficulties involved in politics is certainly true. But, you know, a month ago, everyone had given up. And I think that this is an amazing experience for the Bay Area, because people think of this as an area with white wine and brie cheese and Vovos and Chardonnays and people just hopping in and out of hot tubs. And that really obscures the tremendous passion that people feel for sports here. It's an amazing sports area. And what we've seen is, instead of losing one more California corporation, one more business in the midst of a recession, people from the mayor's office to local investors, from Walter Schornstein to one of my partners, Larry Barrett, amazing amounts of energy going to keeping the team here.
And there's a base hit for Eric Young, another Dodger rookie. Speeding around second, making it to third is Ashley. Back to first, and Young is just barely safe. Young, former wide receiver out of Rutgers, He caught the game-winning touchdown pass, and Rutgers upset of Penn State 4 years ago at Penn State. So he knows his way around a football field, and now he's showing off his prowess here on a ball field, Joe.
Royce Clayton tries to pick him off. If someone would have told Royce Clayton a little sooner, they would have had him. Willie McGee did his job by throwing to the cutoff man, but they did not alert Royce Clayton quick enough that Young had made a big turn at first base.
So the Dodgers have tied the game, and since the home run by Webster, Kevin Rogers has not retired another hitter. Ashley has singled, and now Young has singled him to third, and Young is also a guy who is a threat to steal a base here, although you wouldn't figure that they'd take that risk of the third out with the pitcher out. Here is Kevin Gross to try and put himself ahead. 1-1 in the 5th inning.
You know, you look at these Dodgers and you ask yourself, where is Darryl Strawberry? Where is Eric Davis? Where are all those high-priced free agents that they went ahead and signed?
Young goes down to second base. Yeah, the Dodgers ended up getting 10 home runs total between Strawberry and Davis. Between them, they played 119 games, and they are spending more than $7 million in salaries for the two of them this year. And that's the Dodgers season right there, the beginning of the disintegration.
We're sitting in September, and Eric Karros has 19 home runs, and the next Dodger has about 5.
Well, in fact, we've just seen the next Dodger, which just tells you all you need to know about the Dodgers in '92. The second leading home run hitter of the Dodgers right now is Mitch Webster. Tonight he hit number 6.
Number 6.
Brett Butler is the second leading RBI man. Brett Butler, the leadoff man generally, now the number 2 hitter. 39 RBIs. That is hit high and deep, but foul. Very much foul down the left field line. 0-2 the count.
If you're scoring at home, that was scored a wild pitch, not a pass ball.
Joe Morgan, my partner, also Dudlin, is the official scorer tonight. Well, so Lee, you're saying that whether or not you get this group together to make an opera lure should happen in what, the next 10 days?
Yes, in the next 10 days.
So by the end of September?
By the end of September, it's likely that an offer is put together.
Is there a deadline to make this offer?
Not really. In the meeting that the National League and American League had on September 9th, originally the thought was they might go ahead through their ownership committee and consider this issue. Obviously, the commissioner being having resigned and all of the furor that was happening in baseball, they simply didn't get around to it. But they did announce that they would be open and receptive to a San Francisco-based offer being put forth. I think it's important for people to remember here, John, that everyone's team is ultimately vulnerable. If you grow up as a baseball fan and hand it down father to son, mother to daughter,
you could lose that team. Lee Steinberg, many thanks, and good luck to you. Many thanks for stopping by and chatting with us.
My pleasure, John.
1-1 the score. We go to the last of the 5th. Dave Dravecky. He, of course, a Giant who, in 1989, against all odds, made a comeback and thrilled the fans at Candlestick Park. Not only did he pitch, he pitched beautifully. As they said afterward, welcome back, Dave. It was a great moment here at Candlestick Park, and those who were here to see it will not soon forget the heroics, the heroic nature of Dave Dravecky, who, of course, eventually lost his left arm. He had cancer and is now inspiring people all around the nation with his courage and with his faith, and has just come out with a new book, which I would suggest if you're a Giants fan and knew of Dave Dravecky, you might enjoy looking it up, and it makes a good read. Dave Dravecky. It was a great moment here at Candlestick just 3 years ago. Here is Steve Decker leading it off for the Giants. 1 ball, 1 strike the count, as Kevin Gross now is in a 1-1 tie. Gross unable to put himself ahead. The base hit. He struck out to end the first half of the 5th. Each team 1 run, 4 hits. Decker popped to short his first time. He'll be followed by Royce Clayton and then Kevin Rogers, the Giants pitcher. This is the last third of the Giants batting order.
No, John, go ahead.
Giants and Dodgers 5th and 6th place respectively, but the pennant races themselves are beginning to fall into place. Right now the closest division race is the American League East. The Milwaukee Brewers now 4 games back of the Toronto Blue Jays. And all of the other divisions are getting wider and wider. The Pirates today moved 6 games up on the Montreal Expos. And the Baltimore Orioles remain 5.5 out. And lately, Joe, Baltimore cannot beat anybody. They've lost 9 of their last 13 in the stretch. And if you're going to win a division, you do just the opposite. 3-2 now, the count to Steve Decker. In the American League East, the Blue Jays were beaten today by Texas at the which dome is that again? Yeah, Sky Dome, 7-5. Milwaukee was down 3-0 to Baltimore in the last of the 6th at County Stadium. But look at that final, 9-3. And Baltimore 4 games back in the loss column, 5.5 overall. Milwaukee 3 back in the loss column. But it is Baltimore that has 3 games left with Toronto. Milwaukee does not play Toronto again. That is a walk for Decker, leading off for the Giants in the 5th inning. Now let's go to Gary Miller.
John, one of the rarest sights in baseball, a triple play. Mickey Morandini will turn it against the Pirates with Bonds and Van Slyke aboard. Jeff King hits the liner. Morandini doubles off Van Slyke and Bonds, only the 9th in history. 3 of the 4 in the National League have come at Pittsburgh. This is the first since '68, the first in the National League since 1927. PA announcer in Pittsburgh, Art McKinnon, seen 3 of them.
Unassisted triple play. Here is Royce Clayton, runner at first, nobody out. Last of the 5th inning, a 1-1 tie. You know, the last triple play before today, unassisted triple play, was performed by Ron Hansen. Shortstop, a very fine player. Back in the 60s, he had been with the Orioles, but he had left the Orioles, and I think he was with the Senators at the time he pulled off the unassisted triple play. And I knew a man, Joe, who had pulled off one all the way back in 1927. And I'm talking about Johnny Noon. He did it while playing first base for the Detroit Tigers, and it ended the game. Bottom of the 9th inning, or I think the top of the 9th inning, in Detroit. 2 men on, nobody out, and a line drive to Noon, and he turned it into an unassisted triple play. So that is indeed one of the rarest of all feats in Major League Baseball. And Mickey Morandini joins the list with another guy who did it in a World Series by the name of Bill Wambsgans. You ever see him play, Joe?
No, never saw him, John.
Can you spell his name?
No, John.
He was also back in the 20s, Bill Wambsgans. Royce Clayton flied out deep to right in the 2nd. Bert Candlestick, 1-1, last of the 5th. And it is now 1 ball and 1 strike. John Miller and Joe Morgan, ESPN Sunday Night Baseball from Candlestick Park in San Francisco. Perhaps the last Giants-Dodgers games ever to be played in San Francisco. The possibility exists. The Giants will move to St. Petersburg next year. And we are here for what could be an historic occasion. This rivalry began 103 seasons ago. 1-2 now to Clayton. 1890. San Francisco with a great baseball history. It was here that they had the Pacific Coast League baseball for many years. And of course, San Francisco was a cradle for great players all the way back. I mean, Joe DiMaggio, his brothers Vincent, Don, they came from here. Harry Heilman, Tony Lazzari, Lefty O'Doul, Lefty Gomez. And the list goes on and on. And there was a time here when, even when they were still in the Coast League, Joe, that they considered themselves the center of the baseball world because of all the great talent which
there were players
from here
who played here that wouldn't even go to the major leagues because they had it so great in the Coast League and they loved playing here in San Francisco. So this has always been a great place to play baseball. But Seal Stadium was a lot different than Candlestick Park.
Seal Stadium, it was in town and had a very small seating capacity. And you talk about the provincial nature of San Francisco, a city very proud of itself and with good reason. A great city. 1 out, 1 on. Clayton having struck out. Here's Rogers, and it's a foul ball bunt. Russ Hodges came with the Giants from New York, a Hall of Fame broadcaster. First spring training game, it was the Giants and Dodgers, just like it had always been. Well, a few times he slipped up in the broadcast and called them Brooklyn and New York. Always corrected himself. Got a pile of telegrams about 2 feet high at his hotel afterward from angry San Franciscans. Many of whom told him in no uncertain terms he just should go back to New York. Opening day now at Seal Stadium, 1958. And he has put little cards all around his booth at Seal Stadium, such as it was. saying San Francisco Giants, Los Angeles Dodgers. He's not going to make that mistake for the first regular season game. Strike 2 now, Rogers. So he starts the first broadcast, an historic occasion. He says, ladies and gentlemen, baseball history made today for the first time ever. Major League Baseball played on the West Coast as the San Francisco Giants meet the Los Angeles Dodgers here at the Polo Grounds.
Well,
almost.
It was very difficult when you have a name change. I still call the Los Angeles Raiders the Oakland Raiders, personally, so that's a problem.
0-2 the count, and strike 3. Rogers right up to the bitter end trying to get that bunt down. 2 men down with Decker at first, and we go to the top of the order for Tiny Felder, who has scored the Giants' only run.
Well, watch Kevin trying to make a sacrifice bunt here, and you can see the head of the bat drop below the ball, and that will always get you a pop-up or you'll miss it completely. John, I was thinking yesterday, I talked to some people about the move. You know, the Giants were actually going to Minneapolis, and the Dodgers were coming to California. And Walter O'Malley talked Horace Stoneham into bringing the team west. He said west is where to go. And I think one of the enticements he used was that there was going to be pay TV here in California. California was the land of pay TV, and that was going to be the thing of the future. And I think that's one of the enticements he used to help get Horace Stoneham to change his mind about going to Minneapolis and instead coming here to San Francisco. I also heard an erroneous story that said that he offered Horace Stoneham his choice of the 2 cities. You know, according to Vin Scully, that was not true because the Dodgers had already been offered, you know, the land and everything in Los Angeles. So, and maybe O'Malley, being as smart as he was, he might have known that Stoneham was going to want to come to San Francisco because San Francisco was the place at the time.
0-2 to Felder. 2 down in the 5th inning. 1-1. And of course, in New York, particularly in the borough of Brooklyn, there are people, lo these many years later, 35 years after the fact, after the Giants and Dodgers both played their last games in New York, who have not forgiven the late Walter O'Malley or the Dodgers for deserting them.
And I think that's an interesting point in that even though we, meaning all the San Franciscans in the Bay Area, people do not want the Giants to move, you know, a lot of teams have moved in Major League Baseball over the years, you know, and that's, you know, a thing that I think we have to accept, that this would not be the first ever move in Major League Baseball, and it will probably not be the last move if it is done. So I think that's something that we have to accept, even though we do so not with a good heart.
1-2 to Felder. McGee would be next. That's a foul ball. Of course, if you're a Red Sox fan, how easy it would be to accept if your arch rival, the Yankees, all of a sudden were to move.
Yeah.
I mean, in some ways, because of the nature of the rivalry and the history of the 2 franchises, there are ways that it transcends even just the local loss. This would be felt by baseball fans all around, who appreciate the historic nature of the rivalry of the Giants and Dodgers. Same as the Cubs and Cardinals. What if one of those ball clubs left and went to a completely different time zone?
Well, I think that's why I guess I'm going to have to disagree with Tommy Lasorda in that if the team does move to St. Petersburg, it's not going to be near the same rivalry, you know, in St. Petersburg that it would be, you know, here between the 2 cities, because again, I think the personalities of the cities have a lot to do with the rivalry. And I have to agree with Ben Scully, though. I think the Giants fans hate the Dodgers more than the Dodger fans hate the Giants.
Into center field. Base hit just over the head of Offerman. And Decker will stop at second base. So Felder with a bloop single into center. Now Willie McGee will have a chance to put the Giants back ahead. We're 1-1, last of the 5th inning. Willie McGee grew up in this area,
right
across the bay in the East Bay, north of Oakland, and he grew up a Giants fan as well as an A's fan.
And he's had an opportunity to play for both. He played for the Oakland A's a couple of years ago, and now here he is with the Giants.
Now, even though this is all one big Bay Area, one market, you might say if you're a businessman, there are Giants fans and there are A's fans. I mean, there are some who root for both, but on this side of the bay, they root for the Giants. Willie McGee is out on one pitch. The Giants leave two. Top of the order coming for the Dodgers. It is 1-1. Along with Joe Morgan back here, your Sunday night telecasters, our final Sunday night telecast of the year. The Giants and the Dodgers, maybe for the last time in San Francisco, an historic rivalry. So tonight, with the two ball clubs down in the standings, we've been talking about that, revisiting some memories. And now here with us, and maybe you noticed that it's not just me and Joe in the booth, Corey Bush. Now, Corey Bush is vice president of the Giants, and Corey grew up in Los Angeles, a Dodgers fan, but now he's a vice president of the Giants and certainly has many memories of the Giants and Dodgers over the years.
Oh, numerous memories. It's been such a fabulous rivalry ever since both clubs came to California. You know, I heard you talking earlier, John, about the heritage of baseball in the Bay Area. You know, I was surprised when I found out a few years ago the term sandlot actually was coined in San Francisco when they were playing ball in the old sand dunes near where Civic Center is today. But that's how far back baseball goes and the tradition goes here.
Indeed, as Jose Offerman is the hitter, switch hitter, and he fouls this one away down the right field line against Kevin Rogers. Offerman has walked, and he has been thrown out on a bunt attempt. He'll be followed by Brett Butler and Mike Sharperson. 1-1 in the 6th inning. Well, they keep telling us that the fans here in San Francisco dislike L.A. much more than the reverse is true. And short hopped by Clayton. He got it. Nice play.
As I said before, Royce Clayton has played defense great since he's been here with the Giants. You know, if he starts to hit, he's going to be an exceptional player. He's going to be a great player. But defensively, he has done everything you could ask for. This is a tough play. It's a line shot, and he short hops it, stays down on it. Now he has plenty of time, and he also has a very good, accurate, and strong arm.
So one away. Nice play by Royce Clayton. We've seen some pretty good plays here tonight. And that brings up Brett Butler. But growing up in L.A., maybe, Corey, you can go back and tell us your memories. Was there indeed some animosity from the fans in L.A. toward the Giants and San Francisco?
I think in the old days, John, when both clubs first came out from New York, the rivalry was very intense both ways. But I think because Los Angeles over the years has grown so rapidly and there's such a transient population that perhaps some of the rivalry from south to north has dissipated. Certainly the rivalry from north to south has not. But I remember when I was a kid growing up in Los Angeles, and my father, who was from New York and was a great baseball fan, took me to games as early as 1958, and I grew up listening to Vin Scully and learned a lot about the game listening to Vin Scully. The rivalry was very intense, and when I came to San Francisco in 1971, I noticed how intense it was from north to south. But I think over the years, some of the rivalry from the southern part of the state has gone away a little bit.
Brett Butler, the hitter, is flying out into a double play. Mark Leonard making a spectacular catch to start the double play. And Brett has also singled. 1 for 2 facing Kevin Rogers. Now Matt Williams is going to have to hurry. Clark stretching full out. Ended up doing the splits there, but he got the put out. And Butler is retired. Out number 2, another fine defensive play for the Giants. 2 men gone.
Well, you play in so tight on Brett Butler to take away the bunt so that when he chops the ball and you have to back up on it, only Matt Williams' strong arm makes this work. And a nice stretch by Will Clark. Stretches out, picks it up, and he decides he better fall down.
2 men gone, and here is Sharperson. He is 0 for 2, has struck out and hit a double play ball. 1-1 in the 6th inning. Corey Bush, the vice president of the Giants, is here with us. Grew up in L.A. and moved to San Francisco, of course, with the Giants now.
You know, there's something rare out there right now. That entire Giant infield is all first-round draft picks. Matt Williams, Royce Clayton, Robbie Thompson, and Will Clark. You don't see that very often in the big leagues today.
And then if Royce Clayton would evolve into a star and Matt Williams would come back and hit with the big numbers again, you'd really have something.
Let me ask you a question, Corey.
And this should be caught easily by Leonard, if there is such a thing tonight, and if the wind conditions are at Candlestick. Hold that question, Joe.
All right.
Corey Bush, Giants vice president, here with us. We've got a 1-1 ball game after 5.5, and Will Clark is coming up. Candlestick Park for what could be the last Giants-Dodgers game along the shores of San Francisco Bay. Will Clark coming up for the Giants. It's a 1-1 game. And with us is Corey Bush, vice president of the Giants.
And, Corey, I just wanted to ask you, of all the things you've seen between the Giants and the Dodgers, the fight with Roseboro, Marichal, etc., what is your most memorable moment?
Boy, that's hard to say. There are so many fabulous moments between these clubs, particularly if you go back into the 60s, where it seemed every year they were fighting one another for the pennant. I remember that the Dodgers finished ahead of the Giants by 2 games in '65, and then the next year a game and a half. But I'd have to say, since I joined the Giants in 1979, 82, when we were fighting the Dodgers for the National League West, when we had that last weekend series here, when it was Atlanta, San Francisco, and Los Angeles were fighting for it, and we had that marvelous game on Friday night. When the Dodgers came to town, we were down by 2. We knew what we had to do, and it was a great game until Rick Monday hit a grand slam in the 7th inning and eliminated us that night. And the next day, Saturday, we came back, and the Dodgers just pounded us. And then again, on Sunday, it came down to Atlanta and Los Angeles, and your home run off Terry Forster, which knocked the Dodgers out, really, in a way, was redemption for all of us, because of the disappointment of the 2 days before. We had come so far in '82, had such an exciting season, that I'd have to say that your home run, that game on Sunday.
Will Clark is safe at first. The ball dropped by Gross. Garros also had dropped it. Got the ball there in time, but Gross then dropped it, and we'll see how they score it. But Will Clark, who earlier had a sacrifice fly and a strikeout, has reached first base, and as he tries to stay around 300, he'd like to see him score a hit. We know that.
Well, we'll see. It's a hard shot. Curls comes up with it after he knocks it down. Now watch, there's plenty of time. He fires it to Gross. Now he drops it, so we'll have to see how they score it.
And they have scored it a hit.
They have scored it a base hit. So that will help Will Clark in his quest for 300. But now with Corey saying that my home run was his favorite, you see why I paid him to come on, right?
That's right.
That was one of those paid deals.
Yeah, that paid like TV that they were talking about.
Paid political announcement here.
Well,
then I'm going to have to get equal time.
There just haven't been in the last 14 years that I've been with the Giants. The Dodgers and Giants have had some marvelous games, but they only had that 1 year when they were really in a race together.
And then listen to this. Here we go. The crowd starting to chant, "Beat L.A."
Which we haven't heard for a while.
Some of that old fire coming back here at Candlestick Park. Giants fans chanting, "Beat L.A." Mark Leonard, the hitter. Clark at first. Nobody out in the 6th inning. A 1-1 game. Leonard has grounded to second and popped out to shortstop. 6 hits for the Giants, 4 for the Dodgers. Matt Williams is on deck. And there's ball 1. On this date, 24 years ago, September the 20th, 1968, here at Candlestick Park, Juan Marichal won his 26th game of that season. A 26-game winner. And that was the most by a Giants pitcher in a single season since 1936, when the great Carl Hubbell won 26. This one in the wind, could be trouble, and it is. It was dropped by Sharperson, who also ended up being dropped. And Simon Lasseur says, "I hate this part. I hate it now. I've always hated it."
Well, you talked about it earlier, at the beginning of the telecast. The wind plays havoc here. There's a look at the flag. That flag is not indicative of the way the wind is blowing. It's swirling. Now watch Sharperson. He gets over. He thinks he's got it right here. Now all of a sudden he has to fall back toward the infield, and it hits him on the heel of his glove.
And listen to Candlestick Park. The chant is getting louder here. "Beat L.A."
You could see it hit off the heel of his glove, but the wind does cause you problems here in Candlestick.
They'll score that no play, no error.
John, you were talking about Juan Marichal. In his years against the Dodgers at Candlestick Park, all the Giants had to do was throw their gloves out on the field if Juan was starting. He had something like an 18-2 lifetime record against L.A. and Candlestick. They just could not. Not that there were too many clubs that had a lot of success against Juan, but he really dominated them.
A 10-year period. Juan Marichal, 62 through 71, won 202 games and lost 97. His average season for 10 years was 20-10. And you have to go all the way back the days of Lefty Grove to find a pitcher who had 10 consecutive years with that kind of dominance. That ball is out of play as Karros gave chase on Marichal. 24 years ago today on his 26th. And of that came just 2 days after Ray Washburn of the Cardinals pitched a no-hitter against the Giants in this park, which came 1 day after Gaylord Perry had pitched a no-hitter against the Cardinals. Back-to-back no-hitters here at Candlestick in 1968.
You know, the interesting thing about Marichal is that how he was one of the greatest pitchers ever. He never won a Cy Young Award, which is just amazing to me. Every time he had those great seasons, Koufax was a little better.
Okay, here's another ball in the air. And Brett Butler says, hey, I played here for a long time. Let me take this one. Out number 1. Now, Will Clark, a very intense fellow, told us what effect the sale of the ball club has had on him and the team.
Instead of focus being on baseball, focus is on the stadium, and for that matter, every time you run out on the field, you don't know basically what you're playing for. You don't know whether you're playing for a move or to stay or what. And so for that reason, it's been a major distraction.
Well, Clark, he doesn't like those distractions. He likes to get out there, see the ball, hit it hard, run hard, and do everything hard. He's aboard with an infield hit. By the way, they did score an error on Sharperson for that dropped pop foul. So the Dodgers' first error of this game, and of course they lead the planet in committing errors. Here is Matt Williams, 2 for 2 in the game. Will Clark at first, and there is a strike.
I was going to say, if that's not an error, they've never made one here at Candlestick.
Corey, I guess you as a Dodger fan as a kid, for you like anybody else, when you thought of the Giants, first off you thought of power. I mean, you thought Mays, McCovey, Cepeda, guys like that.
Well, particularly every time McCovey came up against Drysdale. Because as great a pitcher as Don Drysdale was, and he was absolutely one of the finest of his era, somehow or other Stretch just owned him. And he hit some balls off of Drysdale, both here and in Los Angeles, that I'll never forget. I know Don will never forget. It seemed like poor Mays paid, because every time Willie came up, Don would sit him down.
Yeah. So that's a very nice way of putting it. I remember the year Drysdale went into the Hall of Fame. I asked him about hitting batters. That's a foul by Matt Williams. 0-2 the count. 1 out. Clark at first in the 6th inning. A 1-1 tie here. But I asked him about hitting batters, and Drysdale said to me with a straight face, he said, not one time in my career, never, ever, did I ever throw at a man's, throw intentionally at a man's head. Kind of hesitated before he said head.
Well, actually, you know, I've had some conversations with Willie Mays about that, and Willie will tell you, Don never hit him. He'd knock him down, but he said he could never hit me because he always threw in an area where he could get out of the way. Mays did spot him that. He would knock you down, but he wouldn't hit you.
Hey, did anybody ever hit Willie Mays?
That's what I'm going to say. I think it was more, you could attribute it more to Mays' agility than you could Drysdale's aim.
Brett Butler's got this one, too. 2 men gone in the 6th inning. And Clark still at first. Now, coming up on Tuesday, 7:30. The Toronto Blue Jays closing in on a division title. Well, 4 games up on the Brewers and the Orioles. It's their last chance. Brady Anderson and the Orioles. Joe Carter and the Blue Jays, 7:30, 4:30 Pacific. And then Wednesday, same thing. Last chance for the Expos. Now 6 back of the Buccos at Stade Olympique in Montreal. The Pirates and the Expos. That's Wednesday night baseball. 7:30, 4:30 Pacific. Right here on ESPN.
Joe, I think it was also a tribute to the fact that many times John Roseboro would let Willie know, okay, you're going down on the next one.
That is ball one. By the way, we've mentioned the Marichal-Roseboro incident where Marichal hit Roseboro over the head with his bat. 1965. And before we talk about the incident itself, let me just say that incident probably ended up costing the Giants a pennant that year. The Dodgers, as you said, won by 2 games, but Marichal, number 1, had to sit out his next start at Dodger Stadium as sort of a suspension. And of course they just didn't want the trouble that they thought was going to happen if he went there and pitched. But he also then proceeded to lose 4 straight games after that incident. Well, and hey, who taught Gross to throw that pitch? Drysdale?
No, that's very true. It had a great effect on Juan because it was a very unfortunate situation. He thought that when Roseboro threw the ball back to Koufax on the mound that he deliberately threw it near his head and it ticked his ear, and And Juan felt that he had to retaliate, and you're right. Juan did lose his next 4 games, and as you said, the Dodgers ended up winning the pennant that year by 2 games.
Yep, and Marichal had started that year in such an incredibly hot fashion. He'd won 10 straight decisions before he ever lost a game, but then he lost those 4 in a critical time. The 2, by the way, I think we should also say, Corey, as time went on, had a chance to get together and were able to resolve the differences. Marichal apologized. They shook hands, and Marichal, of course, right near the end of his career, played for the Dodgers.
That's right. Now, anybody who knows Juan Marichal knows what a fine gentleman he is, and was as a player and is today. And that was just an unfortunate experience. It ought not to be what Juan is remembered for, certainly.
Well, a lot of things happened in the heat of battle, though, because I think, you know, we're talking about a very intense rivalry, and it was very important to win. And all of a sudden, you know, a lot of little things go wrong, and next thing you know, they escalate into a big thing, and then you end up with a fight.
And one of the ironic aspects of that day, the count now 3-2 to Robbie Thompson, 2 down, Clark at first. One of the real ironies was that Marichal's mound opponent that day here at Candlestick Park was Sandy Koufax, and usually their managers tried to avoid having the 2 aces face one another. It was one of those rare head-to-head matchups.
That was a rare matchup.
3-2 now to Robbie Thompson. He's flied out and struck out. There goes Will Clark, and Will will have to go back. Time taken.
Yeah, that's a late timeout by Robbie Thompson, and Gross is very upset, and I don't blame him. I know Robbie, something flew in his eye or whatever, but once the pitcher starts to the plate, you can't call timeout. That's too late. Even though Brian Gorman gives him timeout, that is too late to call timeout. First of all, the pitcher could injure himself because he did try to stop.
Clark running, and Thompson fouls it away. Talking about the Giants and Dodgers and 1966. Hall of Famer Willie McCovey hit what most observers felt was the longest home run ever hit here at Candlestick Park. It was before the ballpark was enclosed against the Mets on September the 16th of '66. McCovey hit one that they measured at 500 feet out into right field.
They tell me that before the ballpark was enclosed, the ball carried much better to right and to right center because the jet stream went that way. Now what happens with the enclosed ballpark, the wind comes in and it swirls around, so you never know. It does seem to carry still very well to right center, but it used to carry better to right in those days.
Well, the wind, before they enclosed the stadium, the wind always blew towards right field at all times, and that's what really hurt Willie Mays going to left field. Willie learned to hit the ball to right center to take advantage of it. But before they enclosed it, you know, left-handers had a real advantage here because the wind always blew to right field.
3-2 to Robbie Thompson. Clark at first. There he goes. Robbie fouls another one away. Still 3-2. We were talking about the incident in 1965. Juan Marichal, and right in the middle of that, swinging the bat over the head of John Roseboro. Number 27, that's Marichal. And there's number 30, Orlando Cepeda, coming in. Number 12, Jimmy Davenport. You see the Dodgers coming out as well.
Number 26 with the bat is Tito Puentes.
Yes. It was a great job by the umpire. I mean, he just ran right in, grabbed Marichal. I mean, that was a great job.
You had Marichal's right arm and Koufax's left arm in the middle of all those bats swinging around.
Yeah.
I don't think there was some heart-stopping.
Yeah. Very courageous effort.
There goes Clark. And ball 4 to Robbie Thompson. Robbie must have learned the style he exhibited on this at-bat from Brett Butler. He battled it out with Gross, and now 2 men are on, and Steve Decker, the young catcher, will try and put the Giants ahead. Clark at second, Thompson at first. There's Reed in the Giants bullpen warming up.
All right, both you guys were around in '58 when they played that first ball game on the West Coast, the Dodgers and the Giants at Seal Stadium. Do you remember who was the first hitter to hit a major league game on the West Coast in that ball game? And I'll give you a hint, he was a native San Francisco.
So it really had to be a Dodger.
No, a Dodger. You're right. They were in San Francisco.
Did he lead off for the Dodgers? San Francisco.
As
I'll give you another hint. He was traded at the end of the '58 season for Wally Moon.
So to the Cardinals, traded to the Cardinals. Give us the answer before we do this. Don't make us look bad like this.
Gino Somoli.
I was only 6 years old then.
Gino Somoli.
Joe, no, so
Joe was older. That's right.
Yeah, I was older.
That. Happy birthday, Joe.
Belated, yeah.
Only a day.
Joe was much older than me then, although not now. Won't admit to it now, but he was considerably older at that time. Gino Somoli?
Gino Somoli, native San Franciscan, still lives in the Bay Area. He was the first major leaguer to come to bat on the West Coast.
That's quite a trivia question, but you know I'm very poor.
Now, John's going to check on it, so I got to get out of here.
That is just fouled by Decker. The Giants won that first ever ball game, April 15th at 58, 8-0. And the paid crowd, by the way, it was a complete sellout, standing room only, but a little over 23,000.
At Seal Stadium, that's right.
Now, 3 days later, they played the first game ever in Los Angeles at the rather larger LA Coliseum, 78,000 plus. And the Dodgers beat the Giants 6-5 in the first ever game down there. But Jimmy Davenport had 3 hits, Giants rookie. But he missed a base on what would have been the tying run, and they appealed, and he was called out, and they lost by a run. The Giants did win the season series that first year, 16-6 from the Dodgers, who finished in 7th place. And Gino Somoli was the first batter ever to bat in a game on the West Coast, 1958. I now know. Thanks to Corey Bush, the vice president of the Giants, who's here with us.
I know Corey doesn't mind, John, but he's the executive vice president.
Executive vice president?
Yeah.
All right.
I know he doesn't mind.
Then I called him only the vice president?
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so I amend that. Ladies and gentlemen, he's not only the vice president, but the executive vice president. I'm John Miller, along with executive broadcaster Joe Morgan.
That's because I said your home run was the highlight.
Exactly. That's why I thought I better correct that, you know?
I remember the home run. I remember Terry Forster must have thrown his glove 30 feet in the air. Did you see it when you were?
No, I saw it on replay, but I didn't. At that moment, I was probably too happy to see anything else but the bases.
3-2, the runners go. Right to third. Here's the throw by Sharperson, and Karros stretches out to get it. The executive vice president of the Giants, Corey Bush, has been with us. Corey, thank you.
It's been great. Thanks, man.
1-1 after 6.
Brought to you by Bud Dry. For a beer that's refreshingly different, try Bud Dry. And by Subway. Sandwiches and salads made fresh before your eyes.
The blue skies over San Francisco as seen from Candlestick Park. And however, here in Candlestick now, the fog has arrived. I'm John Miller along with Joe Morgan. There's the flag out in center field above the rim of the ballpark. And the fog has begun to pour into Candlestick Park, coming in off the Pacific, over the hills of the peninsula, and then dropping right into Candlestick Park, as the fog has done for these many years. Candlestick opening in 1960. And when that fog gets here in particular, with that wind, it is very cold. And one thing, when as Eric Karros leads it off, sort of a phenomenon here is that, or a bit of phenomena is that when that fog comes pouring in here, you can track what the wind is doing just by looking at the fog. It sort of gives texture to the wind itself, and you can see it swirling about. There is strike 2 to Karros. Karros is fly to right and fly to deep center. You can see up on those lights, you can see that fog reflected off the lights. Now, across the bay in Oakland, they will get some of this too, but it doesn't really get nearly as cold over in Oakland on most nights as it can here at Candlestick.
Well, it really doesn't. They do not get a lot of fog in Oakland nearly as much as there is here in San Francisco, and the wind is not as big a factor.
Into right field, there is McGee for number 1. Karros retired in the 7th. Let's go to Gary Miller.
John, we showed you the unassisted triple play by Mickey Morandini. More rare feats from Sunday afternoon. David Justice, Braves already leading 10-1. tees off on Al Osuna of Houston, his 18th home run, a 3-run shot. Next batter, Brian Hunter, his 14th home run, 14-1 Braves. Next batter, Ron Gant, his 16th home run, a season-high 16 runs, the first time when Lemke added his since '86, 4 in 1 inning.
There's a fly ball, left center field. That one is going to go to the wall out there. The wind really seemed to knock that one down off the bat of Mike Piazza, the godson of Tommy Lasorda and probably the Dodgers catcher of 1993. And mainly what they love about him as a catcher is his bat.
Well, Mike Scioscia has been the Dodger catcher for the last few years and has done a great job over the years. But he's getting up a little bit up in age, and they're looking for a young fella. And here's Mike Piazza. This is a high fastball, and he hammers it to left center field. And as John mentioned, the ball had a chance of going out, but the wind seemed to really knock it down after it got halfway out.
So now here is Mitch Webster, who is the Dodgers' second leading home run hitter. Remember, the Dodgers, in 1977, they had 4 guys hit 30 home runs that year or more on the same club. Now this year, 6 home runs is second in the club. There is Rod Beck, who has emerged as the Giants' best pitcher out of the bullpen late in games, become the closer. He's warming up now. We're in the 7th, a 1-1 game. Kevin Rogers pitched real well here tonight, but he's got a little trouble here in the 7th. Runner at second, and Webster, who homered in the 5th, at the plate. Ball 2. Talking about Mike Piazza, the runner at second base, who just doubled in AAA ball this year. He hit .341 with 16 homers in 94 games at Albuquerque. 2-0 the count. That's foul. Piazza from Phoenixville, Pennsylvania, outside of Philadelphia. Went to the same high school as did Andre Thornton. You remember Thornton? Big home run slugger. And Piazza broke all of Thornton's home run records in high school.
We also might mention that his father is part of the St. Petersburg group that is trying to purchase the Giants from San Francisco here.
2-1 the count to Webster. Into right field. McGee staggering a bit as the wind carries it. And he makes the grab, and Piazza holds at second base. 1961, County Stadium, Milwaukee, and Willie Mays hit 4 homers in the same game for the Giants.
Delivery, and Mays sends another one. Tell it, bye-bye, baby. Aaron doesn't even move. It's going far up into the center field bleachers. Willie Mays has tied a record, 4 home runs in a game.
Indeed. And the Giants that day hit 8 home runs against the Milwaukee Braves. The day before, they had hit 5 homers, setting a major league record with 13 homers in 2 consecutive games. But Willie hit 4 that day in 4 consecutive at-bats and almost had a chance to hit a 5th. Here is Ashley.
You know,
he is 1 for 2.
Interesting thing there, John, did you notice that he ran around the bases?
He hustled.
Yeah, no hot dogging, no nothing. Just hit the home run and go around the bases.
Well, in the 9th inning, Jimmy Davenport was up with 2 outs, and he had a routine fly ball to Bill Bruton in center field. When Bruton caught it, the Milwaukee fans booed Milwaukee's Bill Bruton because they wanted to see Mays get a chance to hit number 5. And it just was not to be. But on the play-by-play, the fans here, they know exactly who that was. And the old-time fans in New York knew who that play-by-play man was. The man who said, "Tell it bye-bye, baby." That was the legendary Russ Hodges.
And I think still the greatest call I've ever heard is the Giants win the pennant. The Giants win the pennant on Bobby Thompson's home run.
1951. Russ Hodges in the Hall of Fame. And he came west with the Giants, and he and Lon Simmons formed what for me, Joe, I grew up with him. Obviously, I have that bias, but for me, it's the greatest play-by-play tandem ever in baseball. Russ Hodges and Lon Simmons. And Lon still going strong across the bay, though. He broadcasts Oakland Athletics baseball. Had a chance to hear him earlier this afternoon, broadcasting from Seattle. There's Eric Young on deck. But if you were a Giants fan, and in the background on your radio, you heard "Bye-Bye, Baby," you got goosebumps. You knew it was good news for the Giants. And in those days, he said "Bye-Bye, Baby" a lot. There's a base hit for Billy Ashley, and here comes Piazza with the go-ahead run. The Dodgers have taken a 2-1 lead in the 7th inning. And the The rookies are the ones who do it. Piazza with the double, and then Ashley with the clutch 2-out single.
Well, Billy Ashley is a guy they think is going to be a great slugger. They think he has the type of power that only Jose Canseco can exhibit, but he's still a little raw, and it's going to take him a while to adjust. This is a fine swinger. He cuts down on his swing. That is not a big home hitter swing. And watch, he takes it to right field. That's really more of a line drive type swing, and he gets the job done.
Now here is Eric Young. This could be trouble. Robbie Thompson, he made it look easy, just in fair ground when he caught it. And that's it for the Dodgers. A run and 2 hits, though. And the Dodgers lead the Giants 2-1 after 6½.
Some games with the Giants that I really thought that we were in the World Series at that moment because of the intensity and the way that we wanted to play and to beat them so bad, and they wanted to beat us, was so high that it reminded me of some of the games I had against Oakland in '88.
Oral Hershiser talking about his thoughts on the Giants and the Dodgers. And for Oral, of course, he's got some memories of some rather intense struggles here over the years with the Giants and the Dodgers. Here is Royce Clayton to lead it off for the Giants. Now Kevin Rogers, the pitcher, is due up second, but with his club now trailing 2-1, a pinch hitter has come out. So after Clayton, it looks like we'll see a pinch hitter for Kevin Rogers. 2-1, the Dodgers ahead. Last of the 7th inning. The Dodgers with a chance to take this series, but also a chance to win what could be the final game between the Giants and Dodgers ever in San Francisco. That's a called strike. The first game ever in San Francisco between the Giants and Dodgers, as we have already discussed earlier, was won by the Giants 8-0, 1958. In the Dodger bullpen, left-hander John Candelaria has gotten up toward the middle and thrown. Eric Young made a great try for it, but it's through for a base hit.
One of the things the Dodgers will be trying to do next year is solidify their infield defense, especially up the middle. And Eric Young is not known for his glove, but he's going to get a shot. The ball's hit right up the middle, and he made a dive for it. Couldn't come up with it. Actually dove past it. But if he would have caught it, he wasn't going to be able to throw Clayton out anyway. Clayton runs well.
So here is Benjamin now, right-handed hitter. Benjamin batting 176, 13 for 74. 1 home run. Facing Kevin Gross in the last of the 7th. 2-1. The Dodgers lead the Giants here. Pops the bunt up. And Piazza can't quite get there. Interesting how Piazza came to be signed by the Dodgers. You know, Lasorda said he'd thrown probably 100,000 pitches to this guy over the years as his godson. And then he got him a workout at Dodger Stadium one day. Ben Wade, the Dodger scouting instructor, was there. And he said that at Dodger Stadium, Piazza hit about 15 balls up into the blue seats out there in the outfield. And Lasorda said, well, what do you think, Ben? And Ben said, well, give me a schedule of his games and I will go see him play. And Tommy said, wait a minute. Now, if he was a shortstop and he hit like that, what would you do? He said, well, I'd sign him right now. He said, well, now, if he was a catcher and you saw him do that, what would you do? He said, well, I'd sign him right now. He says, well, then you better sign him because he's a catcher. And Wade looked at Lasorda, knowing full well that he was a first baseman. He said, Tommy, don't kid me. The guy's a first baseman. He said, no. He used to be. Now he's a catcher. Sign him. Well, they signed him, and Tommy says that's the story of how Piazza became a catcher. And next year may be the Dodgers' #1 catcher. Well, strike to Benjamin, 1 ball and 2 strikes. He looks down at Wendell Kim, the third base coach. Let's see if the bunt got to be taken off here.
Well, they sent Benjamin up to bunt. Otherwise, they would have sent a left-handed hitter up. I think, they made it very obvious that they were going to bunt the runner over by sending up a right-hander to go against the right-handed pitching Kevin Gross.
So don't come back till you get that bunt down.
That would be my thoughts in this situation.
He got it down. Gross to Young at first base. Out number 1. Joe, we've been talking about Juan Marichal. Let's have a look.
Well, I've seen this delivery a lot of times from this angle, and probably the same thing happens to Wes Parker there of the Dodgers that happened to me on several occasions. This is just the greatest delivery in baseball history. Look at the motion, how high he gets the leg. And he could throw strikes from any angle, over the top, sidearm, three-quarters, screwball, curveball, everything. And he used this candlestick wind to his advantage. The wind blew out to right field in those days. He'd throw that slow curve against the wind, and you'd think it was going to be too high, and all of a sudden it would just drop right off the table.
Mike Felder coming up, runner at second. And Ron Pernoski, Dodger pitching coach, out to speak with Gross. The Dodger bullpen is busy. So Felder will face Gross here. Juan Marichal in baseball's Hall of Fame. His number has been retired. And Joe, what was one of the great pitching duels probably in the history of Candlestick, and one of the great pitching duels ever, 1963, July the 2nd, Warren Spahn at age 42 with a record of 11-3 versus Juan Marichal with a record of 12-3. And in the bottom of the 16th inning, with both pitchers still in the game, in a 0-0 tie, Willie Mays hit a home run against Spahn to end the game. That was the only run of the game. Mays hit that homer at 12:31 a.m. You can imagine how it might have been a little fog in the ballpark by then. And with Warren Spahn, aged 42 that night, dueled Marichal into the 16th, and Marichal beat him 1-0.
I've talked to Warren Spahn on several occasions. He said from that point on, he went downhill as a pitcher. I mean, at 42 years old, as you mentioned, he's pitching 16 innings. But if you ever take a look at Warren Spahn's bubblegum card, I think you'll really be impressed. I mean, he's got some great numbers, unbelievable numbers. And he said he was still going strong until he pitched those 16 innings against Marichal that night. He said from then on, he lost a little bit, and everything seemed to go downhill.
15,921 were at Candlestick that night. And I don't know how many of them were still there when Mays hit the home run to end it, but...
You mean how many were not frozen?
Yeah. That's a foul ball. Nice catch out there in the Giants bullpen.
Rod Beck made a... Well, that's Reed. Who is that? That is Rod Beck on the left.
Yeah. That was a Beck grab.
There's a line drive. It hits the wall. Now look at the reaction from Rod Beck. Not only does he make the stab easily, comes down gingerly. Looks like he knew what he was doing.
Yeah, it looks like he's a Brooks Robinson fan. 1 ball and 2 strikes to Felder. The Giants trying to get a base hit to tie this game. Benjamin having gotten the bunt down at long last with 2 strikes, no less. 2-1, the Dodgers lead, last of the 7th. Felder is 2 for 3 against Gross tonight. Giants have 7 hits in the game. Nice pitch. Felder is running, but the plate umpire has ruled that the ball was caught and held by Piazza, that it didn't bounce in there.
We have been talking about the Dodger-Giant rivalry, but in the meantime, Kevin Gross is pitching a very fine ball game for the Dodgers, mixing his speeds well, as we talked about at the beginning, and he gets Felder here on an off-speed breaking ball. See it go down. Nice pitch. And we'll take a look and see if Piazza does catch this ball in the air. Yes, he caught it. He caught it before it hit the ground.
Smart running by Felder, and yeah, I'd like to see more guys do that. Just go ahead and run, and let them tell you later if you should have run or not. Here is Willie McGee. Willie, who's out on a first pitch ground out in the 5th with a chance to drive in a run, chases a bad one here.
Well, you're talking about Mike Felder. That's the way he plays the game, and that's why he won the Willie Mack Award. I mean, he plays the game hard. It doesn't cost him anything to run to first base, so he runs. I mean, he is the kind of player that you love to have on your ball club, and I'm glad his teammates voted him that award because it is special to him.
1 ball, 1 strike to Willie McGee. You saw Beck and Reed in the Giants bullpen. The Dodgers bullpen is also busy with left-hander Candelaria and right-hander McDowell. There they are. Both of them are ready if needed. And Candelaria might be needed in a moment if McGee gets aboard, because Will Clark is on deck. 1 ball, 1 strike to McGee. 2 down, last of the 7th. And he chased another bad one, and Young throws him out, and that's the inning. Still 2-1 Dodgers. We are heading to the 8th inning now at Candlestick Park.
McCovey, the man who has hit 521 home runs in his fabulous career. Swung on and hit in the alley in right center field. A base hit going all the way to the wall. Then he's sitting around third. He's coming home. And the ball game is over. McCovey with a double. And the Giants have won it. The congratulations are all for McCovey. The Giants are mobbing Willie Mack.
Willie McCovey and number 44, Stretch, they called him. He was the Rookie of the Year. The Giants Rookie of the Year, 1959. The National League Rookie of the Year. He hit 354 as a rookie. Although at one point he was sent back to the minor leagues a couple of years later. There's a foul by the pinch hitter, Dave Hansen, against the new pitcher, Steve Reed of the Giants. We are in the 8th inning. Good evening to you. I'm John Miller, along with Joe Morgan, our final Sunday night telecast of 1992. And perhaps the final Giants-Dodgers matchup at Candlestick Park.
You know, it's interesting, John. You mentioned Willie McCovey. He was Rookie of the Year in '59. Orlando Cepeda was Rookie of the Year in '58, before, you know, the year before. And then they both were first basemen. So McCovey, they moved Cepeda to left field for a while. They moved him at third, but he tried a lot of different positions. And McCovey even played some outfield.
Yeah.
So they tried them all.
They liked McCovey a little better. They didn't like either one of them in left field, but McCovey did a little better at it than Cepeda did.
I think a lot of people forget McCovey could run when he first came up, you know, before his knees gave him problems. And that's why he was a little better in the outfield than Orlando Cepeda. But also on that film, everyone else was excited jumping around. That was about as excited as you will ever see McCovey get. He doesn't get very excited. Stretch.
Well, that was a big moment. Wasn't that the culmination of Willie McCovey Day when they brought him back?
Right, exactly. And I mean, but you see, I mean, that's Willie. Everything is in stride. He takes it in stride.
I used to love to watch McCovey just take his practice cuts between swings. He looked imposing up there. Bobby Thompson throws out Hansen. There's one away for the Dodgers here in the 8th inning. 2-1, the Dodgers lead the Giants here at Candlestick. Coming up now, Tuesday, the pennant race. Last chance for the sliding Orioles. And ESPN will be at Camden Yards. Joe Carter in the first place Blue Jays and the Orioles. Brady Anderson and company. 7:30 Eastern, 4:30 Pacific. And then Wednesday, the Pirates, first place in the National League East. The last chance for the Expos. Wednesday, 7:30, 4:30 Pacific. And ESPN will be there. Now look at the fog coming into Candlestick Park. Just pouring in over the rim of the ballpark as Jose Offerman comes up and takes the ball. In 1960, the year that Candlestick Park opened, so much fog came in one night during a Giants and Dodgers game that 3 balls were dropped in the fog. Willie McCovey, in fact, hit a triple when they could not see his fly ball. And right after that, they stopped the game. For 24 minutes, a fog delay here at Candlestick.
Well, you have to realize it's 7:30, not 11 o'clock at night right now. It'll be that way by 11 o'clock tonight.
Offerman has been thrown out. Number 2 in the Dodgers' 8th inning, and Brett Butler will come up.
John, this is our last telecast. I think you should give me a little hint at who you think should be the most valuable player in the American League, most valuable player in the National League, Cy Young Award winners in both leagues.
Well, I think the National League right now, for me, it's Barry Bonds would be a strong candidate. They've talked about Gary Sheffield, and he's had a great year, but Sheffield himself pointed to Terry Pendleton and says, hey, he's done it with a first-place club in a pennant race. And I'd have to say either Pendleton or Bonds, but I kind of like the finish that Bonds has had. And another 30-30 season for him, and so many hits and so many home runs down the stretch. He's really saved the best for last when they were challenged by Montreal.
Okay. I want to argue with you over that. I would probably split my vote right now and give Sheffield a half and Bonds a half and see how it goes the rest of the way. But I agree that Barry Bonds has really come to the forefront. I said today before the game, if the season lasts 2 more weeks, he would win the batting title. He has gone from like 290 all the way up to 315, you know, before the day's ball game. All right, what about the Cy Young Award?
The Cy Young Award in the National League, I mean, for me, still Tom Glavine. He's won the 20, but he's tailed off. But also the pitcher there in Chicago, Greg Maddux.
Right.
I think if he can get up to 20, it'd be tough to vote against him. Tewksbury I like as well, but I think that Tewksbury didn't have the victory totals of the other two guys. I'd have to either go with Glavine or Maddox, and I might go with Maddox because of the extraordinary year he's had with very little help from that Chicago batting order. Well, they averaged about 3.5 runs a game in his starts. That's not very good, and yet he's 18-11. How about you?
Well, I think I'd have to go with Glavine. I think Greg Maddox has had a great year, but I think it's kind of similar to what Sheffield was saying about Pendleton. Glavine has done it in a first-place situation.
Nice pickup by Reed. Threw a fastball to Will Clark. Almost knocked him down. Clark might want to charge the mound after that throw. 2-1 Dodgers after 7.5.
Most of our customers.
Night Baseball is brought to you by Anheuser-Busch, who proudly brings you family talk. Let's stop underage drinking before it starts. And by AC Delco Automotive Parts. AC Delco, it's like buying time.
It's the Giants and the Dodgers from suddenly windy, cold, and foggy Candlestick Park. And here comes Will Clark on to face John Candelaria. Actually, better said, Candelaria on to face Will Clark with a 1-run lead. So here is the Candyman, Candelaria, against Will Clark. Left-hander against left-hander. Clark has hit a sacrifice fly, struck out and singled. Candelaria, tough lefty, good breaking ball, and Roger McDowell in the bullpen. There is Clark. 1 for 2, his batting average for the year. Rests at 301. 23,471 is the paid crowd tonight at Candlestick Park. And pretty good crowds all through the weekend here for these two ball clubs at the bottom of the table. But now they start to chant, beat L.A. again around Candlestick. 2-0 the count. They had 21,000 here plus on Friday, 31,000 plus yesterday. Now better than 23,000 tonight. So there's still a bit of that old Giants and Dodgers feel, even with the two ball clubs having horrendous years. Strike to Clark, and he can hardly believe it.
Well, John Candelaria is very tough on left-handers. And the thing I think that makes him toughest is that he stays away. He does not miss inside. He doesn't hang a curveball in the middle of the plate. It's always on the outside part of the plate. Right there.
2-2. Again, Clark doesn't like that call.
Well, each one is right on the outside edge, and that's the way Candelaria pitches left-handed hitters. Now watch the catcher's glove. He'll set it up outside there. Watch where Piazza's glove is. Now watch where he catches the ball. Right out there.
Now the 2-2 pitch to Clark, too far outside. Will Clark is 2 for 11 in his career against Candelaria.
Actually, that's pretty good. I know it doesn't sound good, but Candelaria is awfully tough on left-handers. You only get to see him one time in the game. 2 for 11, not nearly as bad as you might think it would be.
Chris James has come out of the on-deck circle. From third base, Sharperson, and he got it. So Candelaria got the man he wanted to get, and now James will be introduced as a right-handed pinch hitter for Mark Leonard. And we'll see if Lasorda makes a move.
All right, now what about your American League MVP and Cy Young Award winners?
The American League, for me right now, is a little more difficult because Dennis Eckersley, in terms of the Cy Young vote, said recently that having been a pitcher who pitched 250 innings in a season, he knows what that means, what it takes. And he says a guy like a Roger Clemens or one of the guys who pitched those heavy-duty innings as a starter, to him should get the vote for Cy Young. And I agree with him. But I think I like Eckersley more as an everyday guy as a closer. For me, he could get a vote as an MVP. Francisco, bottom of the 9th inning. The Dodgers, Jerry Royce on the mound and Vin Scully at the mic.
8-0 Dodgers, but it is Jerry Royce. Little Nubber back to Royce. He picks it up. He's got a no-hitter. Jerry Royce, at 31 years old, has done it.
Jerry Royce, he became the 6th Dodger since the team moved to Los Angeles to pitch a no-hitter That was 1980. Fernando Valenzuela pitched one 10 years later, which was seen right here on ESPN against the Cardinals. And then Kevin Gross pitched one this year against the Giants. The Dodgers, since they've come to California, as Roger McDowell, the new pitcher, faces Chris James, the pinch hitter. 3 of the 8 no-hitters pitched by the Dodgers since they've come to the West Coast have been pitched against the Giants. Koufax, Royce, and this year Kevin Gross. Chris James, now they're bringing the right-hander to face him, but James has hit .400 against this particular right-hander. 6 hits in 15 at-bats against him.
Well, Roger McDowell is a sinker ball pitcher, and Chris James a good low ball hitter.
Sharperson, and it's dropped by Karros. And here are the Dodgers playing a very fine ball game, well pitched, well played, and all of a sudden the Dodgers look like they have looked for much of 1992.
Well, the problem is Sharperson throws the ball low, but it doesn't sink. And watch Karros. He tries to catch it with 2 hands. You will find most first basemen always reach out, catch the ball with 1 hand because they have the big glove. And watch, he tries to catch it with 2 hands, and he lets it get too close to him. When you have 2 hands, 1 hand on the ball glove, you can reach out. See, you catch it 2 hands, you catch it back too late. You can't reach out with 2 hands. You can only reach out if you go out with 1 hand. And it's an error on the first baseman.
Second error for the Dodgers. The fans start the Beat LA chant again. Matt Williams, the hitter. And of course, he's got the power to put the Giants ahead with 1 swing of his bat. But McDowell does not often allow home runs. You get the great sinker ball.
It's very difficult to get the ball in the air off of McDowell.
There's the sinker, low, ball 1. The fog pouring into Candlestick and then swirling around inside the ball here. 2-1 Los Angeles, last of the 8th inning. The Giants and the Dodgers. Williams has 2 singles and a fly ball. 2 for 3 tonight. Ooh. Trying to hit that one downtown.
Well, he had a high pitch. He had a chance to do it. A high sinker will go in the air. This pitch is up, and if Matt can connect with it, it will go in the air. But that's just a straight fastball. He throws right by him, actually. So he's late on that because he's probably looking down. You look for a sinker ball pitcher to throw you the pitch down. So your eyes are really focusing down and trying to make sure you don't swing the ball too low. So the high fastball just goes right by you. But I think you have to give him the high fastball and hit the sinker.
There's a blooper. Shallow right field. In a hurry. And actually can't get to it. Now holding in the play was James, and only now does he get to second base.
Well, as you said, the Dodgers were playing a good game. And all of a sudden, the real Dodgers have come out. The Dodgers of 1992, we should say. There's a fly ball. You know, it's hit the right field. Now watch, he gets there in plenty of time. He's there. The ball is, he just misjudges the ball. The ball is still waist high when he misses it. See, he gets there in plenty of time. Now watch. He just misses it. But the runners could not go simply because he doesn't know what's going to happen. So now he sees him drop the ball, and he has to go on into second base, but he can only get 1 base.
And that'll be an error on Ashley, the 3rd Dodgers error. And the crowd is really picking up the chant now of Beat LA.
I don't know if they're picking up the chant about LA or they saw our next guest come in.
Yeah.
Are they saying Beat LA or say hey? Which are they saying here?
Number 24, the great Hall of Famer, the legendary Willie Mays has stopped by the booth. And Willie, can you believe it? I mean, this may be the last time for the Giants and Dodgers in San Francisco.
I hope not, because all the tradition is here, right here. And first of all, I want to apologize to you guys. You know I would have been here. I just got off the plane. Here now, but...
No. We wanted to save the best for last.
Oh, yeah, sure. You told me that at the dinner. It's just being here. This is exciting to me, you know.
You know, I tell you, I wish you could have seen the open they did. It was great. They did an open, you know, of our telecast. And Tony Bennett is singing I Left My Heart in San Francisco. And they show us some shots of you swinging, McCovey, and some of the great players, you know, have played here. And we'll see it again. But, you know, I grew up here, you know, and I got goose pimples just listening to it. And, of course, you know, it's been kind of a difficult broadcast for me, truthfully.
Now Darren Lewis, the pinch runner at second. Thompson has popped it up, and Karros, the Dodgers finally caught one. Now he makes the throw across, and Offerman is able to leap up and
He
grab.
finally caught one, John.
Well, Willie, they've made 2 errors here in this inning. Yeah.
The last 2 pop-ups were the drop for errors.
Oh, no, and John, I thought he was making a joke.
No. Now there's Darren Lewis, the pinch runner at second base, the possible tying run of the game. And Williams is over at first. Thompson is fouled out. 2 men gone. And the Giants are going to go to their bench again here for a pinch hitter, trailing 2-1. And it's going to be Patterson coming up.
Yeah, John Patterson is one of their young players. He had a great spring, and he looked like he was going to maybe even make the ball club. He played here for a while, got off to a pretty good start, and went back to the minor leagues. He's one of their players of the future. In fact, if they do move to St. Petersburg with the artificial turf, it's going to be tough on Robbie Thompson's back, and he is a good second baseman.
Hey, Willie, look over here for just a second, will you?
You got it.
Hey, he still looks pretty good, doesn't he?
Yeah, but look at the hair. You and I together.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, you and I together.
You look better now than you ever looked.
That's right. I'm working now.
All right, here's
this kid here, Joe, I saw him play center field the other day, and I was wondering why. You know, you take a kid for second base and put him out in center field in this particular ballpark now.
Well, that's a good point. As you know, it's very difficult to play center field here. But what they're doing, they're looking for a center fielder that can maybe catch the ball and add a little pop.
Yeah,
well, you'll work with him in the spring.
Yeah, he's a nice kid.
Yeah, but he'll be a great center fielder by the time you finish with him.
Well, I'll get him.
2-1 Dodgers, 2 on, 2 out. Oh, came right after him. It is 0-1 now. The Giants looking for that one big hit. They've not been able to get it tonight. Nor have they been able to get it much this year. The Giants.
John, wait a minute. Give us a break.
One of the things we've been doing tonight, Willie, is because, you know, of the status of both teams, we've been kind of going back and, you know, replaying the Dodger-Giants rivalry and talking to some people. Ben Scully has been on, you know, talking about the Giants and Dodgers rivalry. Orlando Cepeda. And it's been, you know, truthfully for me, it's been a very interesting night. And, you know, I guess the game has become secondary to us, but I think the fact that, you know, this could be the last game that the Dodgers play the Giants here at Candlestick, we thought that we'd go back and show, you know, some of the things that have transpired and talk to some of the people. And I know you must have some great memories of the Dodgers.
Well, I have some great memories coming from New York, Joe. I think it led from New York in 1951 when I came up. To 1958 when they started out here. But we had to play 2 years out here before we could get it back.
Okay.
I'm talking about the rivalry because the Dodgers didn't have the type of club to play with us. And so the rivals just began in the last 7, 8 years, I think. Back again, I'm talking about, you know.
Well, tonight on our telecast, the Giants have 1 run and 7 hits, but Willie Mays has at least 4 home runs. Although we saw you hit them in Milwaukee tonight earlier.
Yeah.
Strike 3 for Patterson. The Giants leave 2. They're still trailing. Dodgers 2, Giants 1.
Well, I haven't seen her
17th, 1989. And the earthquake. The Loma Prieta earthquake hit Northern California. And the World Series was about to proceed at Candlestick Park. The Giants and the Athletics. And, of course, the earthquake came, and the World Series was put on hold for quite some time. That was 3 years ago. That was the scene at Candlestick Park. The Bay Area came through that pretty well. The people responded, and some great moments came out of that. But a tragedy, many deaths, and of course Joe Morgan was here as part of that with ABC Television as part of their World Series coverage that night. And Joe, it was a special moment when you were experiencing that earthquake with none other than Willie Mays.
You do remember what we were doing that night, right?
We were just about to go on, Joe, if I remember correctly. And I think that was one of the times I was quiet.
Exactly. You were very quiet. But we didn't know what was happening at first. And then I guess I tell people this 100 times. I'll never forget what you said. Man, let's get out of here.
Let's get out. I said, Joe, something is happening. Let's get out of here. You're right.
Yeah, but you used your high-pitched voice.
That means I was scared.
Right. And we ran out to the mound, ran out to the middle of the diamond.
Oh, yes.
Here now is Karros, as Sharperson is grounded out. You saw the changes for the Giants. Manwaring is now the catcher. Beck is now the pitcher. Felder has moved over to left, and Lewis has stayed into play center. And the comebacker, and Karros is out number 2, just like that. On this date, 37 years ago, September 20th, 1955, Willie Mays, for then the New York Giants, hit a home run, and it was number 50. First time you hit 50, and that was
in New York.
Yeah. September the 20th, this date, 37 years ago.
Look how young I am.
Hey, you could move.
You better know it.
But, hey, Willie, what are you doing with those batting gloves on?
I never use them.
I know, but you had some on there.
I was probably trying them out.
Oh, okay. That's what I was talking about. I couldn't remember you using batting gloves.
No, I never could try. I never could use them. I couldn't feel the bat with those things.
So, Willie, what was the greatest moment for you in the Giants and Dodgers?
I think it wasn't a moment. It was just playing the Dodgers, going to Evans Field. They're coming to the Polo Ground. When they came out here, they had to come up here and play, and then going down to L.A. It was just playing the Dodgers. It gave me excitement because you know you had to fight. You know you was going to do something. I had to do something or whatever,
Now, that great comeback in '51 really got fueled 3 days after you were 13 and a half back.
Yeah,
on an incredible catch you made in right center field of the Polo Grounds against the Dodgers, and you whirled around and you fired a strike 325 feet to the plate and doubled up Billy Cox. Remember that play?
Nobody remembered that because it was in the playoff and we didn't have television at that time. It was you're exactly right, a twist around, and I had to throw a home plate.
Willie Mays could do it all. Coming into the final inning. The Dodgers took the field tonight before the ball game to play the Giants at Candlestick Park. Giants may be moving to St. Petersburg. And Tommy Lasorda in last place for the Dodgers. Giants in 5th place. And yet when Lasorda came on the field, the crowd reacted. And Lasorda put on a show. Tommy Lasorda. He never liked it here at Candlestick. Still doesn't. The sooner they leave here, he says, the better. Willie Mays has joined us in the booth. I'm John Miller, along with Joe Morgan. Tonight, our final telecast on Sunday Night Baseball for 1992. And Joe, as the Giants come to bat in the last of the 9th inning, I enjoyed it again, as always.
My pleasure, John.
Looking forward to 93.
Yes, I do. Also,
Royce Clayton with a swinging strike. And tonight is a kind of a special telecast. There's no pennant race here, but perhaps history, sad history for Giants fans and maybe Dodger fans, too. Maybe the last game in this rivalry, because certainly it would be much different with the Giants in St. Pete.
Well, I've always wondered. I was going to call Will and ask him, why don't you buy the Giants?
Buy the Giants? I wish I could. If I could, I would do it because I feel they should be here. I think it's a wonderful rivalry that we have with the Dodgers, and I think if we happen to go to St. Pete, it's going to take a little time to get back in, gear a little bit. So I think it should stay.
1 ball, 2 strikes to Royce Clayton.
A lot of people may not realize, but you're part of the Giants organization still, which I think is great. You work with the Giants.
Well, Bob Lurie gave me a job 5-6 years ago, and I've been going to spring training, just doing things for the Giants, whatever they need, But as you know, I do whatever they need to, have done. I do it, and
That's just what you did when you played.
Yeah, whatever they needed.
Whatever they needed.
I work for everybody in the organization. Whatever they need, I do it, and that's it. It's no big deal.
1 ball, 2 strikes to Clayton, and 2-2. McDowell on the hill. Now, Willie, I mean, you talk about the Giants and the Dodgers, but when you came to San Francisco, I mean, they talk about the people seem to warm up to the guys who came of age here, like Cepeda and McCovey.
Yeah. Well, it taken me 2 years for them to warm up to me, but I understood that because they had the Coach League out here, they had Joe DiMaggio out here that they idolized so much. It didn't bother me that much.
Well, the Dodgers having a few problems.
That one is not going to be scored in there. That should be a base hit.
Would have been a great play if they'd been able to complete it. And safe at first is Royce Clayton, the possible tying run.
Well, Clayton chops it over the mound, and as I mentioned earlier, see, he gets out of the box well, he runs well. Offerman grabs it, he's running towards right field, trying to throw back across his body, and that's not an easy play. And they give him an error on that only because he makes errors. That's why they gave him an error. That ball, it was a tougher play than the ball that they gave Will Clark a hit on earlier.
I agree with you. That should have been
that's a base hit.
Yeah. But that's 4 errors for the Dodgers. they will get, they'll not be given any breaks here in San Francisco.
Right.
And here is Manwaring, the Giants catcher. 41st ever of the year committed by Jose Offerman, with the Felder on deck. The bunt, but foul. 2-1. Dodgers ahead last of the night. But Willie, I mean, I talked to Lon Simmons, the great broadcaster, now with the Oakland Athletics. But I mean, in those days, everybody talked Giants. Everybody listened to the radio on the Giants. The papers had the headlines every day, and everybody on that ball club was a celebrity wherever you went. I mean, this city lived and ate and breathed Giants baseball.
We had two great announcers. We had Russ Hodges. We had Lon Simmons. They were guys that came from, well, Russ came from New York, and he knew the ball players. We played college together. We were just like a family when I played with him, and I felt that Lon was a part of us. And whatever we did, it stayed right with us, and that was a great thing that you have, you know, in a ball play.
And then over the years, Oakland came in, and attendance began to
Oakland
fall.
sneaked in. Oakland sneaked in because that was a rule at one time that you couldn't have a ball club within certain distance. I don't know how Fielding got him in, but he came from Kansas City into Oakland, you know, and Mr. Stoneham said, okay. So, you know, now we going the other way, you know.
How about, as you see, Sports Center right after the ball game. Stay tuned. One out, Felder the hitter. The Giants have a couple of chances here to drive in the tying run of this ball game.
John also might mention that they changed that ball. They scored an error to Offerman on. They changed it to a base hit for Clayton, which is the correct score.
Well, I'm glad to hear it. I'm John Miller. Joe Morgan, Willie Mays here with us. Last of the ninth, the Giants and the Dodgers. And Felder hits a foul out of play. Willie, back in the New York days, I mean, you're in center field for the Giants. Duke Snider for the Dodgers, the rivals. And then Mickey Mantle for the Yankees. Willie, Mickey, and the Duke. Who we've been talking about, we both have said we thought you were the best. For you, other than yourself, who's the best you ever saw?
The best I ever saw, for all around, I have to pick Roberto Clemente because he could do just about everything. But we had a lot of great hitters. We had a lot of great runners. We had a lot of guys who could do a lot of things but couldn't do all the things. And that was the key to me playing baseball. My father taught me to do everything well, run, hit, throw. If you could do all these things, you had a job for life. You know?
And what about, tell us about, I mean, you came up just about 4 years after Jackie Robinson.
Yeah.
And tell us your memories of Jackie Robinson.
Well, I met Jackie before I came to the majors. I met Jackie in '48 when he came to Bonstam in Birmingham, my hometown. That's when I was supposed to go to the Dodgers. And he recommended me, but I knew Jackie very well. He was a very, very, very nice man and a very good, intelligent man on the field.
Well, here we are now, maybe the last time for the Giants and Dodgers, and there are two men down in the last half of the ninth inning. And Willie McGee, a native of the Bay Area, grew up as a Giants fan, rooting for Willie Mays, thrilling to the exploits of Willie Mays, and he is trying to drive in the tying run of this game. Candlestick Park. Willie, when did you first know that Candlestick was going to be cold and foggy and windy?
Well, you know, my theory on that is that I had it over all the guys that came in because when you, as a visiting ball club, you only played 3 games here. I knew how to play center field, but the visiting team never knew how to play. I always had a lot of hot stuff on me. I kept warm all the time. But when a lot of guys came in, a lot of the stars didn't want to play here. And then it helped me. The pitchers didn't want to pitch, so that helped me again. So I hit a lot of balls to right center because they wanted to, you know, pitch me outside. But of course, now you're looking at a fence here. The fence wasn't this close. It was the bleachers when I played.
Right.
That was my out. That was my home run.
Those left field stands. That's
the bleachers. That was the home run. And I said, there's only 12 balls hit that day, hit that year.
1 ball, 1 strike to McGee. Willie is 1 for 3 in the game with a sacrifice. 2-1 Dodgers, last of the ninth.
Willie is thinking about the last hit now. I guarantee he's thinking about the last out.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I don't know if you could help but think about it because there has been so much made of it. Yeah, over the last couple of days. If McGee can get aboard, Will Clark would be next. That's a foul. Now 2 strikes with 2 down in the last of the ninth inning. Well, the first game you guys played on the coast, the Giants won. Now we'll see if the last game possibly
That's good. That's
What
very
happened?
good. Yes, we played at
Seal Stadium.
Seal Stadium. Yeah, we had a very different lineup then.
Yeah.
Willie Kirkland, Leon Wagner,
Cepeda
just came up for his year.
Jimmy
Davenport, Darrell Spencer, the guys that came from New York for a while.
2-2 now to McGee. 2 down in the bottom of the 9th inning. How about Juan Marichal? We talked about him a little bit tonight.
Yeah, Juan came up a little later.
No, he wasn't there then, but
I
mean, just how about tell us about Juan?
Juan and Gaylord Perry was the two easiest guys for me to play behind in the outfield. I can just go out there and play and knew exactly what they were going to do, and I had no problem with them playing. If Juan got 4 runs, I could go home that night. He was that type of pitcher. I don't think I wanted to hit off him.
3-2 now to McGee. It's almost as if the Giants never replaced those 2 guys.
We never had 3 guys. We only had 2. And I guess we did. In 1962, we had 5.
Yeah, Jack Sanford.
Yeah, we had Sanford. We had
Billy Pierce. Billy O'Dell.
Yeah, you follow a little baseball.
Yeah, I grew up. Now look at Candlestick Park. Everybody is up on their feet. 3-2 with 2 down, last of the 9th. And one last giant roar from Giants fans against the Dodgers. Sharperson in the dirt, and it skips away. The tying run has scored. McGee is heading for second, and Will Clark is coming up with the game now tied in the bottom of the 9th. And for just a moment here, the folks at Candlestick are in full throat. The Giants with a chance to beat the Dodgers one last time in San Francisco.
You can tell, Joe,
I could see it coming. Yeah, you're right. Just the way that he was running towards it, he didn't set himself. He was going to watch. Now, he throws off balance. Watch, he never stops. It's a tough play. Now, you have to remember, Willie McGee can run, and I'm not so sure he would have gotten him anyway. And they called it a single and an error. But it was going to be a tough play, and he just could not make it. So it's a single for Willie McGee and an RBI and an error for Sharperson.
Well, they're going to walk Clark, of course, with first base empty. And on deck is Darren Lewis, a right-handed hitter. There he is, number 2.
John, this is the kind of game the Giants and Dodgers play all the time, regardless of how they play in the field. I remember in New York, we were just about last again. But if you beat the Dodgers or if you beat the Giants, you had a great season. And this is what's happening now. The people down in L.A. are watching this game now.
Watching it and cursing their television set. The 2 down and 2 on. A run is in. The Giants have tied the game. Kevin Gross, who pitched real well for 7 innings tonight, no longer can win this one. And now Darren Lewis is trying to wrap it up with the Giants. His first at-bat of this game is coming up. Wasn't that something with 3-2 on McGee and 2 down? All of a sudden, everybody in the crowd spontaneously rose to their feet and began to shout, and they are still shouting.
I think they realize what you and I realize.
Yeah, they're part of this history now.
Yes.
And they are cheering for the San Francisco Giants.
Maybe.
Oh, it got past him. And for the Dodgers, it's a highlight film of 92. The nightmares never cease for the Dodgers. Can anybody here catch the ball?
Well, it chopped right back. Now watch McDowell. Watch, he charges it. Has plenty of time, and it just goes right under his glove. So now you get an error on the pitcher. That is the 5th Dodger error. And you can see Lasorda.
So the bases are loaded with 2 down. And here is Matt Williams to try and wrap it up for the Giants.
I guess he's saying, what else can go wrong?
Yeah. He's also seen this more than once in 1992. And the crowd, listen to this crowd.
BLA.
A strike, says Brian Gorman. It is 0-1. Bases loaded, last of the 9th, 2 down. Candlestick Park. 2-2. The Giants and the Dodgers won last time in 92. Over at third base, Willie McGee. He is the possible winning run, and Matt Williams trying to figure out a way to get him home. Along the right field line, but slicing foul, and in amongst the spectators down there. And Williams broke his bat in that one.
John, I wonder how many of the Dodger players on the field right now are saying, don't hit it to me, please. I mean, especially on the infield. It becomes contagious. I mean, it really does. When a team starts to make mistakes, it just becomes contagious, and you're just afraid, hey, don't hit it to me.
Yeah, well, Sharperson's throwing error on the McGee grounder, although it would have been a nice play if he'd gotten him.
Right.
But that allowed the tying run to score. The Dodgers have made 3 errors in this inning. They made 2 errors in the 8th inning. They've made 5 errors in the last 2 innings.
That's what we're talking about when you got here, Willie.
Almost begging the Giants to come back and win this game. 2-2 in the last of the 9th inning. Check swing, nose, says Dana DeMuth, the first base umpire.
My Dowd cannot throw his best pitch, Joe, which is a sinker now.
Yeah, well,
he got to hold it up.
Yeah, if he throws it and bounces,
something happens.
The game could be over.
Now, Willie, this is a situation that you live for.
Oh, wouldn't bother me.
Game on the line?
Oh, yeah.
This was your spot.
Yeah, that wouldn't bother me.
It's a base hit into center field. The ball game is over. Maybe the rivalry is over, but the Giants have finished it the way it started 34 years ago in San Francisco with a victory against the Dodgers. And for these fans at Candlestick Park, one last sweet moment perhaps. Maybe they'll play here in the future, but maybe not. But for now, a moment to savor. A 2-run 9th inning rally for the Giants, and they have defeated the Dodgers 3-2.
Well, it was a great game. I mean, it was really a great game. I think we had a lot of looking back, on the history of the Dodgers and Giants rivalry, and I don't think there'll ever be another one if the Giants move from San Francisco.
And Willie Mays sat here with us. Willie, thank you.
Well, my pleasure.
And thanks for all the memories.
I'm just glad I got here.
And I'm just glad I got to finish that interview we started at the earthquake.
And now, as perhaps this rivalry here in San Francisco has ended, the words that Russ Hodges used when they left the Polo Grounds 35 years ago. And now the tumult and the shouting have died. The captains and the kings have departed. Mays and Marichal, McCovey and Clark. Lest we forget. Lest we forget. John Miller for Joe Morgan from Candlestick Park. It was the Giants and the Dodgers, and we had a finish befitting the rivalry. Good night, everyone.
These unofficial moments in our national pastime are brought to you by the official airline of Major League Baseball, United. Come fly the friendly skies.
Next on SportsCenter, on week 3, this was not what we meant by in your face. And this was not what we meant by in your face. This was what we meant by in your face. There's an inevitable collision between our Sunday night conversation guest and 3,000 hits, but will it come this year?
Obviously, if you thought I was going to do it next year, you would have came here next year, wouldn't you? And be honest with me, you would have. Okay.
And it doesn't look like much, but this is something that hadn't happened since 1927. And you missed it? You missed it? Poser. Well, if you're lucky, we'll see how the big show develops. And maybe we'll play it, and you can catch it on SportsCenter next. Who loves you, baby?
Hello and welcome to Happy Hour along with Keith Olbermann. I'm Dan Patrick.
On Sunday, number 3 of the NFL season, the defensive lineman decided, in the immortal words of Al Davis, that the other team's quarterback must go down, and he must go down hard.
The endangered species list is growing. We'll get to that in a moment, but we start with the Lions. Their 1991 season started and ended in Washington.